Chapter 7:21. During these 3 days, Chu Mu cultivated as usual and took some time to study the inspector crystals. He realized that the inspector crystals, which were the size of a soybean, had extremely pure inspector chi. When he absorbed it into his spiritual world, it automatically corroded and tempered the sword intent and metal quintessence. Each crystal could last for a day. He was also studying the 8th hand seal of the 9 revolution heaven shocking seal. Chu Mu shockingly realized that he still didn't feel the limit of the 7th revolution of the sword intent and metal quintessence. This meant that he could continue to temper and reach the 8th revolution or even higher. The 7th revolution of the sword intent and metal quintessence was already so powerful. If it was the 8th revolution, how powerful would it be? For a moment, Chu Mu couldn't imagine how powerful it would be. However, it would take at least 3 months to complete the 8th hand seal. After completing it, he would have to temper it. Even in the 1000 Evil Valley, with 5 times the efficiency, it would still take 6 to 7 months. 3 days later, Tu Gang came again with Qin Shanhe and a stranger. This person looked to be around 26 or 27 years old. He had long hair, sword-like eyebrows, starry eyes, and an indifferent expression. There was a kind of indifference that didn't put anything in his eyes. This expression was just as Tu Gang said, very arrogant. Tantai Liuguang, he is Chu Mu, the captain of the Zhen Tian battle team. He is stronger than me. Tu Gang said to the young swordsman with a cold and arrogant expression. Tantai Liuguang looked at Chu Mu. His eyes burst out with an astonishingly sharp radiance. When it shot into Chu Mu's eyes, it was like a stone sinking into the sea. As for Qin Shanhe, Tantai Liuguang directly ignored him. Tantai clan wasn't the strongest person in the inner courtyard under the god condensation realm for nothing. A swordsman like Qin Shanhe couldn't even block a single sword from Tantai Liuguang and was like an ant. Naturally, Tantai Liuguang wouldn't put him in his eyes. On the other hand, he couldn't see through Chu Mu. He couldn't help but have some fear in his heart. He turned his gaze and looked at Tu Gang. What's wrong? You want to fight? Tu Gang chuckled. My strength is much stronger than before. Come. Tantai Liuguang only said one word. Immediately, the two of them went downstairs and arrived at the first floor of the sword tower, facing each other from a distance of more than 10 meters. Chu Mu and Qin Shanhe also walked down to see how strong Tantai Liuguang was. Tu Gang made a grabbing motion with his right hand, and the huge sword that looked like a door appeared in his hand. As he swung the sword, a strong gust of wind whistled through the air, and one could vaguely see streams of air swirling around the edges of the huge sword. Tantai Liuguang did not speak. With a shake of his right hand, the sword was unsheathed, as if he had been holding it in his hand from the beginning. Tantai Liuguang's sword was the complete opposite of Tu Gang's sword. They were almost at two extremes. It was a sword as thick as a pinky finger. The body of the sword was oval-shaped and did not have a blade. The tip of the sword was very fine and sharp. Seeing this sword, Chu Mu's pupils instantly contracted. Like Tu Gang, this Tantai Liuguang was also a special genius. His sword was not suitable for slashing. Most likely, the swordsmanship that he practiced rarely used slashing or similar actions. Stabbing was the most important action, and slicing was the secondary action. Only such actions could bring out the true power of this kind of strange sword and display it to the extreme. Come on, this time I will beat you down. Tu Gang laughed and unsheathed his sword without hesitation. He held the huge sword tightly with both hands and swept it across. The terrifying sword wind roared, and the tyrannical power swept through everything. Tantai Liuguang's figure swayed. In an instant, it was as if he had turned into an aurora. He came close to Tu Gang and stabbed with his sword. A cold light like the North Star pierced through everything. Tu Gang's sword wind was torn apart in an instant, and could not hinder Tantai Liuguang at all. Under the ultimacy of light, Tantai Liuguang's speed reached the extreme. Qin Shanhe could not see clearly at all. He only felt that an aurora flashed past his eyes, and there was no way for him to react. Chu Mu could barely catch a glimpse of Tantai Liuguang's figure. He saw the sword that Tantai Liuguang had stabbed out, and in an instant, he was close to Tu Gang. Tu Gang was shocked. He activated the ultimacy of speed. Although he was not as fast as Tantai Liuguang's speed, he was still much faster than before. He reacted quickly, and the heavy sword suddenly accelerated, blocking in front of him. Tantai Liuguang's figure swayed and disappeared from Tu Gang's eyes. He appeared beside Tu Gang, and with a light slash, his speed was still extremely fast. The ultimacy of light was unique in terms of speed. It was faster than the ultimacy of wind, and was not inferior to the ultimacy of speed. Moreover, it had an extremely strong penetrating power, and was not inferior to the ultimacy of gold. It was a very shocking power. In terms of power, the two ultimacies of light and darkness were more tyrannical than the ultimacy of 5 element. Tu Gang quickly changed his move. Under Tantai Liuguang's attack, Tu Gang seemed to be in a difficult position. Chu Mu could not help but shake his head slightly, because Tu Gang's strategy was wrong. He was good at strength, while Tantai Liuguang was good at speed. There was no absolute strength or weakness between strength and speed. It only depended on the user. Now, Tu Gang had given up his advantage in strength, and used his weak speed to fight against Tantai Liuguang. It was normal for him to be at a disadvantage. After changing his move a few times, Tu Gang also realized that with his half-baked ultimacy of speed, he could not compete with Tantai Liuguang, let alone defeat him. Even if he refined the ultimacy of speed to the limit of the 6th revolution, it would still be difficult for him to compete with Tantai Liuguang in terms of speed. In the hands of different swordsmen, there were differences in the power of ultimacy of the same level. For example, even if Tantai Liuguang refined the ultimacy of strength to the limit of the 6th revolution, he still could not compare with Tu Gang. He changed again, giving up the ultimacy of speed, and changing it to the ultimacy of power. The speed of each slash decreased obviously, but the power of each slash increased greatly. As he waved, the terrifying power moved the surrounding air, forming a terrifying wind pressure. Together with the power of the sword technique domain, the surrounding space was distorted. The disadvantage was reversed in an instant, and he was almost on par with Tantai Liuguang. Qin Shanhe could not see Tantai Liuguang's figure clearly. He could only see a flash of light. Even with his mind power, he could not see clearly. As for Chu Mu, he squinted his eyes and covered it with his mind power. He focused all his attention on the battle between Tantai Liuguang and Tu Gang. He could clearly see the battle between Tantai Liuguang and Tu Gang. Chu Mu had seen Tu Gang's fighting style many times, so he was very clear about it. However, it was his first time seeing Tantai Liuguang's fighting style. Simple, direct, and fast. Every slash gave up all the elegance, and only pursued the most direct and pure killing power. Thrusting was the main method, and slashing was the secondary method. Every move and style seemed to have been practiced thousands of times, and was just right. It was in the realm where there was more than enough, and less than enough. Tu Gang's fighting style was also very simple. He opened and closed wide, and every slash was imposing and powerful. The two of them fought fiercely, but the damage to the surroundings was very small. It showed that the two of them had control over their own strength, and had reached the limit of the frontier realm. Suddenly, the two figures separated. Tantai Liuguang sheathed his sword and looked coldly at Tu Gang. Tu Gang's expression changed, and finally, he said with some anger, "Next time, I will definitely defeat you." Qin Shanhe realized that Tu Gang's left cheek had a thin line of blood. It looked like it was caused by Tantai Liuguang's sword, and Tantai Liuguang was unscathed. This meant that Tantai Liuguang had the upper hand in this battle. However, this did not mean that Tantai Liuguang was stronger than Tu Gang. Once the fragrance of life and death fought, it was impossible to predict who would die in the end. You want me to join the Gentian battle team? Sure, but you have to defeat me. Tantai Liuguang ignored Tu Gang, and looked at Chu Mu as he said coldly. Captain, teach him a lesson. This cold-faced guy only admires people who are stronger than him. Tu Gang sheathed his huge sword, and laughed as he said to Chu Mu. Qin Shanha automatically retreated, and gave way to Chu Mu and Tantai Liuguang. Looking straight at Chu Mu, Tantai Liuguang's eyes emitted a radiance that was shockingly strong. It was like two cold bolts of lightning, and it was frightening. In an instant, Tantai Liuguang drew his sword. His body seemed to have become one with the Liuguang sword, and he turned into a ray of light. He cut through the air and arrived in an instant. Even Tu Gang could not see his figure clearly. Spectators and participants had different feelings. Seeing Tantai Liuguang's speed from the side, Tu Gang was shocked. This guy's speed is even faster. Not only was his movement speed fast, but the speed of his sword was also extremely fast. In the air, after Tantai Liuguang swept past, there was a slight but sharp sound of wind breaking. Tantai Liuguang's speed had completely exceeded the speed of sound. Chu Mu did not move an inch, as if he was scared silly. Facing Tantai Liuguang's sword, he seemed to be unable to deal with it. In an instant, just as Tantai Liuguang's sword was about to stab Chu Mu, a horrifying sword intent was emitted from Chu Mu's body, and it rushed to the sky. The seals in the entire sword tower were automatically activated, and the rays of light flickered crazily, intercepting this sword intent that seemed to be able to pierce through the sky. The sharpness of the sword intent was unparalleled. It was earth-shattering, and the sword intent was invincible. The horrifying sword intent caused a temporary vacuum to appear around Chu Mu's body. It also caused Tu Gang, Qin Shanha, and Tantai Liuguang to tremble. Their hair stood on end, and their spiritual world was directly suppressed. Their muscles were also numb, and their blood almost froze. They were terrified. A terror that came from the soul engulfed their entire bodies. Especially Qin Shanha. The difference between him and Chu Mu was too great. It was as if his entire body had been immobilized, and he was unable to move. Tantai Liuguang's sword move was instantly destroyed. That aurora-like conception was completely destroyed, and the sword that stabbed out was not as sharp as before. Chu Mu casually extended 2 fingers, and with a light pinch, he clamped the tip of Tantai Liuguang's sword, and it was unable to advance any further. Chu Mu's fingers contained the 7th Revolution Sword Intent and the 7th Revolution Gold Profound, and the flowing light sword was unable to injure it. 7. Tu Gang and Qin Shanha's eyes protruded as they stared at Chu Mu. They stuttered and could not utter a complete sentence. They knew that Chu Mu was powerful, more powerful than them, but they never expected that his sword intent and profound had been refined to the 7th Revolution. 7th Revolution. Horrifying power. Tantai Liuguang's indifferent face was filled with shock and disbelief. The person in front of him had refined his sword intent and profound to the 7th Revolution. It was unimaginable. Chu Mu smiled slightly and released his fingers. Tantai Liuguang stared at Chu Mu, and momentarily forgot to withdraw his sword. He maintained the posture of stabbing out, as if he had been frozen into a statue. For a moment, other than the sound of intense breathing, there was no other sound. Chapter 722. In a group, there had to be a pillar that could intimidate the other members and make the other members accept it wholeheartedly. Only then could the group be united and not have internal strife due to dissatisfaction with the other party and eventually fall apart. Geniuses had talents that ordinary people didn't have, which also caused them to have arrogance that ordinary people didn't have. That arrogance might be displayed externally, but it could also be hidden deep in their bones and souls. No matter what, geniuses wouldn't easily admire others, even if they were stronger than them. True geniuses had absolute confidence in themselves and believed that they weren't inferior to others. As long as they had enough time, they would be able to surpass others. However, there were some gaps that were destined to be uncrossable. It was because of such gaps that true geniuses would feel admiration from the bottom of their hearts. No matter if it was Tu Gang or Tantai Liuguang, they were both true geniuses. One of them was the #1 disciple under the god condensation realm in the inner courtyard of the Tantai clan. He was definitely the type that was highly valued. As for Tu Gang, he was Tantai Liuguang's old rival. His position in the Hongtian sect wouldn't be low either. In their eyes, even if it was a god condensation realm swordsman or a sword of Gojoseon, they wouldn't be able to make them feel admiration from the bottom of their hearts. This was because as long as they were willing, they would be able to break through to the god condensation realm in a short period of time. As long as they were given enough time, they would be able to become a sword of Gojoseon. The reason why they were still stuck in the origin realm was because they wanted to build a more solid foundation and continue to strengthen it. In the future, they would be able to go further. However, when facing Chu Mu, they couldn't help but feel admiration from the bottom of their hearts. It was heartfelt admiration. 7th Revolution Sword Intent, 7th Revolution Gold Profound. This was a height that they couldn't reach, but Chu Mu had achieved it. In terms of age, Chu Mu might be a few years older than them. However, even if they were given a few more years, they wouldn't be able to refine their sword intent and profound to the 7th Revolution level. This was because their soul had a limit and could only reach the 6th Revolution. At most, they would be at the peak of the 6th Revolution. That was all. In order to reach the 7th Revolution, their soul would have to be strengthened by at least 2 or 3 times. Even if they had the soul talent to refine their sword intent and profound to the 7th Revolution, they probably wouldn't be able to reach the 7th Revolution at Chu Mu's age. Refining sword intent and profound would become more and more difficult as one progressed. Perhaps refining the 1st revolution would only take 1 or 2 months, but refining the 2nd revolution would take 3 or 4 months, the 3rd revolution would take half a year or even 7 months, the 4th revolution would take more than a year, and from the 6th revolution to the 7th revolution, it would take at least 7 to 8 years, or even more than 10 years. No matter which angle they looked at it from, no matter what reason they used, they all knew that they would never be able to reach Chu Mu's level. That was a difference in quality, a chasm that could not be crossed. Tantai Liuguang's expression returned to indifference, but when he looked at Chu Mu, his eyes could not help but flash with admiration and amazement. At the same time, there was also a trace of battle intent. 7th Revolution. Captain, you are really… Tu Gang smiled bitterly, not knowing how to describe it. Qin Shanhe, on the other hand, looked like he had lost his soul. He had cultivated with all his might and tried his best to catch up. His improvement was also very obvious, but he did not expect the gap between him and Chu Mu to widen. Qin Shanhe knew that he could at most refine his sword intent and profound to the 6th revolution. It was impossible for him to reach the 7th revolution. This was a kind of feeling. Every swordsman who had a clear understanding of themselves and were powerful, experienced, and knowledgeable would more or less be able to feel if they had reached their limit. For people like Chu Mu, whose soul was so strong that they did not know how strong they were, they would not be able to determine their limit, whether it was the 8th revolution or the 9th revolution. This time, Qin Shanhe truly realized the gap between himself and Chu Mu. It was like comparing a firefly to the bright moon. Competing with Chu Mu was an extremely unwise action. As long as he did his best to improve himself and surpass himself, it would be fine. After thinking through this point, Qin Shanhe suddenly felt enlightened, as if a blocked passage had been cleared. His thoughts were clear, his spirit was refreshed, and his whole body was relaxed. Unknowingly, Qin Shanhe only felt that a layer of filth seemed to have been removed from his mind, and it had become purer. This was the benefit of seeing through his own mental barriers. Chu Mu also noticed the change in Qin Shanhe. That instant change, the relief that flashed across his eyes, and the smile that came from the bottom of his heart, made Chu Mu secretly nod his head. No matter what, Qin Shanhe was the vice-captain of the Zhen Tian battle team. As a vice-captain, his abilities could not be too weak, and his intelligence could not be too low. Otherwise, it would be difficult to convince the others in an elite battle team. Recognizing oneself and recognizing one's path sounded very simple, but it was very difficult to do. Qin Shanhe could do it, and in a short period of time, proved that he was a person with great intelligence. It did not mean that he was very smart, or that his intelligence was very high, but that he had the root of wisdom and could comprehend it on his own. Tu Gang and Tantai Liuguang naturally also noticed the change in Qin Shanhe. This was because it was very obvious that Qin Shanhe now had a clear feeling, as if he had been washed clean. Tu Gang was stunned, and Tantai Liuguang looked at Qin Shanhe a few more times. At this moment, Qin Shanhe had truly received Tantai Liuguang's attention. It was completely different from the previous neglect. Tantai Liuguang sheathed his sword and did not say anything. However, his expression let Chu Mu know that he was sincerely convinced. He had joined the Zhen Tian battle team and become a member of the battle team. With a glance, Chu Mu took in the expressions of Qin Shanhe, Tantai Liuguang, and Tu Gang. He smiled from the bottom of his heart. The Zhen Tian battle team. Once it became an official battle team, it immediately developed. His goal was only a small team of 10 people. Now there were already 4 people. It could be considered that he had completed half of it. Most importantly, it was in line with Chu Mu's vision. No matter if it was Tu Gang or Tantai Liuguang, they were all true geniuses, the elites of the elite. As for Qin Shanhe, he was originally not bad. Now that he had comprehended it on his own, his spirit had undergone a transformation. Although he was not as good as Tu Gang and Tantai Liuguang, he could still catch up. Elite. The 3 of them were true elite. As for Chu Mu, needless to say, the word elite was not enough to describe him. In an instant, Chu Mu was filled with confidence to create the strongest battle team, above the 3 super battle teams. The development of the Zhen Tian battle team proceeded silently. The other battle teams only knew that the Zhen Tian battle team had an additional general, Tu Gang. However, they were unable to confirm Tu Gang's strength. Now that Tantai Liuguang was added, they were even less sure. Tantai Liuguang's sword intent had reached the peak of the 6th revolution. Her light profound had also reached the peak of the 6th revolution. The second profound that she had comprehended was the profound of thunder, which had just reached the 2nd revolution. In this aspect, she had lost to Tu Gang. This made Tu Gang happy for a while. With all his battle points depleted, it would not be easy to continue refining. Entering the Crimson Wasteland to hunt and earn battle points was imperative. In addition, Chu Mu's spiritual consciousness would fill up his spiritual world again soon. At that time, he would be able to cultivate the 4th part of the Southern Dipper mind refining scripture. He also needed battle points on the stargazing platform. The Crimson Wasteland was imperative. 4 people? When did the Zhen Tian battle team have another member? That person looks so cold. I wonder what his strength is like. Tantai Liuguang and Chu Mu's group appeared in the Sky Peak Valley together, which immediately attracted a lot of attention. The Zhen Tian battle team was now the focus of attention. Wherever they went, they would receive attention. Under everyone's gaze, Chu Mu's group of 4 left the Sky Peak Valley and entered the Crimson Wasteland once again. With their lineup, even if they encountered a God Condensation Realm swordsman, they would be able to protect themselves. Unless they encountered a powerful God Condensation Realm swordsman, or even a Sword of Gojosian, they would be in danger. As soon as the Zhen Tian battle team left the Sky Peak Valley and entered the Crimson Wasteland, news immediately reached Jin Yanlei's ears. A cold light shot out like a cold lightning, piercing through the air and emitting a shocking sizzling sound. It left behind 2 trails, which slowly dissipated after a long time. Jean Yanlei stood up and stepped out, leaving the Demon Slayer battle team's encampment and entering the Sky Peak Valley. His figure flashed, and before anyone could see him clearly, he left the Sky Peak Valley and entered the Crimson Wasteland. Chu Mu, the Zhen Tian battle team. Jean Yanlei's eyes were filled with murderous intent. He had suffered because of Chu Mu time and time again, and had accumulated a lot of resentment in his heart. Because of this, he couldn't even give it his all during cultivation. If this continued, it would probably give birth to a heart demon. Once a heart demon was born, it would be very difficult to get rid of it. Therefore, it was best to nip it in the bud before it grew. Since that was the case, he had to vent his resentment. The best way to vent his resentment was undoubtedly to kill Chu Mu with his own hands. He would end it with his own hands, vent the resentment in his heart, and let his thoughts flow smoothly. At that time, his soul might be purified as a result. A God Condensation Realm swordsman still couldn't fly. However, their speed surpassed the speed of sound and was extremely fast. Jean Yanlei wasn't a swordsman who had just entered the God Condensation Realm. His cultivation had already reached the peak of the God Condensation Realm. If he broke through again, he would reach the initial level of the God Condensation Realm. Therefore, his speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, he turned into a ray of light and surpassed the speed of sound. However, from the time Jean Yanlei received the news that Chu Mu and the others had left the Sky Peak Valley until he chased after them, half an hour had already passed. He also didn't set up any tracking devices. Therefore, he couldn't find any traces of Chu Mu and the others. The Crimson Wasteland was very, very big. However, Jean Yanlei had time and patience. No matter what, he was determined to find Chu Mu and kill him with his own hands to vent the resentment in his heart. Along the way, all the immemorial ferocious beasts that they encountered were all terrified by the aura that Jean Yanlei emitted. They were unable to move. If the immemorial ferocious beasts were in Jean Yanlei's path, they would be struck by the aura that Jean Yanlei emitted and die immediately. The strength of a God Condensation Realm swordsman was extremely strong. Chapter 723. In the Crimson Wasteland, some primordial beasts lived independently, while others lived in group. There were relatively fewer primordial beasts that lived in groups, and they were not easy to provoke. This was because there were at least 100 primordial beasts that lived in group. Most battle teams would not provoke them unless they were extremely strong. Instead, they would choose to avoid them. At this moment, Zhen Tian's battle team was faced with a choice. Avoid or Qin Shanhe, Tu Gang, and Tantai Liuguang were all waiting for Chu Mu's orders. 10,000 meters away, there was a group of more than 100 primordial beasts. With their eyesight, they could clearly see them. These primordial beasts were called demonic cloud wolves. They were grayish-white in color, and there were black patterns on their bodies. They were like clouds and mist, and they would cause people who did not have a strong mind to feel confused. The demonic cloud wolves were very fast, and their claws were very sharp. They were comparable to the best royal-grade swords. Combined with their beast power, they could easily tear apart a swordsman's protective sword aura and tear his body to shreds. Among the demonic cloud wolves, there were differences in strength. The weaker ones were comparable to a first transition swordsman, while the stronger ones were comparable to a sixth transition swordsman. It was rumored that there was even a demonic cloud wolf king that could easily kill a sixth transition swordsman. It was even comparable to a God Condensation Realm warrior. It was hard to tell who was stronger between a demonic cloud wolf and a swordsman of the same level. It was relative. For example, if a third transition demonic cloud wolf and a third transition swordsman were both third transition swordsmen, the demonic cloud patterns on the demonic cloud wolf's body would interfere with the swordsman's mind. This would cause the swordsman to feel confused, and the swordsman would be temporarily stunned. Although it was only for a moment, it was enough to determine the winner. There were two ways to avoid this kind of dizziness. First, do not look at the demonic cloud wolf's demonic cloud wolf. However, if one did not look at the demonic cloud wolf while fighting, one would be courting death. Second, have a mind that exceeded normal standards, and be able to resist the confusion caused by the demonic cloud wolf's demonic cloud wolf. However, if one encountered a group of demonic cloud wolves, even if one's mental power exceeded the normal standard, they would still be unable to resist. This was because there were too many of them. When dozens or hundreds of demonic cloud wolves stood together, the demonic cloud patterns on their bodies would give people the feeling that they were connected together, causing people to feel even more confused. The hundreds of demonic cloud wolves in the distance did not discover Chu Mu and the others, who had concealed their auras. Chu Mu's eyes were sharp, and his pupils flickered with a sharp glint. His gaze pierced through the void and landed on the devil cloud wolf's body. The devil cloud markings in his eyes seemed to distort, causing Chu Mu to feel confused. However, Chu Mu's mental intent was so powerful that it could no longer be described as exceeding normal standard. He forcibly dispelled the confusion and counted the number of devil cloud wolves. There are a total of 133 demonic cloud wolves. The weakest one is equivalent to a third transformation swordsman, while the strongest one is equivalent to a sixth transformation swordsman. There is no Wolf King. Chu Mu transmitted his voice to the three of them. Captain, should we do something big? Tu Gang asked. If other people did not know who they were, they would think that they were a group of bandits. I will go first and attract the attention of the demonic cloud wolves. You guys go all out and kill them quickly, Chu Mu said without hesitation. With so many demonic cloud wolves, they would definitely be able to gain a lot of battle points. It would be a pity to let them go. Moreover, with his current strength, after a few days of familiarizing himself with the 7th Revolution Sword Intent and the 7th Revolution Gold Profound, he was already able to use them as he wished. He could use them as he wished, and they would definitely be extremely powerful. This pack of demonic cloud wolves was also an excellent test subject. With a swoosh, Chu Mu's body moved. With the support of the metal profound, the sharpness of his body directly cut through the air, reducing the resistance of Chu Mu to the lowest. He surpassed the speed of sound and shot towards the pack of demonic cloud wolves like a shining golden sword. As soon as Chu Mu moved, the pack of demonic cloud wolves was immediately alerted. They all let out terrifying howls and their bodies shook. As their muscles swelled, the demonic cloud patterns on their bodies seemed to come alive. Then, the power within the demonic cloud wolves burst out in an instant, and they instantly formed a simple half-moon formation and rushed towards Chu Mu. The terrifying aura of the beasts spread out and rushed over. Sand and stones flew everywhere, and even the ground seemed to be shaking. As the demonic cloud wolves ran, the demonic cloud patterns on their bodies seemed to be connected together. As they ran, they wriggled as if they were paintings that had come alive. They had the effect of confusing one's mind. Chu Mu's pupils trembled. As he contracted, the 3 mental stars in his spiritual world flickered rapidly, resisting the chaotic impact brought about by the demonic cloud patterns. He was sure that if he had not condensed the 3rd mental star, he would have fallen into a state of confusion and dizziness when facing the demonic cloud patterns in front of him. It was no wonder that the demonic cloud wolves that lived in packs were feared by many. With a change of thought, Chu Mu's speed suddenly increased, and he directly rushed into the half-moon formation of the demonic cloud wolves. He was extremely powerful, and he was not afraid at all. He unsheathed the 8-sided desolation sword and rushed into the pack of demonic cloud wolves. As the sword light flickered, it wrapped around his body and formed an arc-shaped cross. Then, 4 demonic cloud wolves were beheaded and died. It was as if he had entered a place where no one could stop him. At this moment, Qin Shanhe, Tu Gang, and Tantai Liuguang also moved. They increased their speed to the extreme, unsheathed their swords, and their spiritual consciousness burst out to kill the demonic cloud wolves. Under Chu Mu's sword, None of the demonic cloud patterns were a match for him. His eyes were filled with golden light, and the confusion of the demonic cloud patterns could not affect him at all. Every sword strike would take away 2 or 3 demonic cloud wolves' lives. There were only 133 demonic cloud wolves in this pack, and Chu Mu's killing speed was extremely fast. The 7th Revolution sword will and the gold ultimacy made his attacks extremely sharp. Kill, kill, kill. The carefree instant kills were intoxicating. In just 3 breaths of time, more than 30 demonic cloud wolves had died under Chu Mu's sword. Tantiliuguang was the first to arrive, and he killed 2 demonic cloud wolves. Tu Gang and Qin Shanha also quickly arrived and launched their attack. The demonic cloud wolves were like barley, falling one after another. Their movements were very uniform, and their attacks could not pose any threat to Chu Mu at all. When they approached him, they would be torn into nothingness by Chu Mu's terrifying sword will and gold ultimacy. Even if the demonic cloud wolf king was here, it might not be able to do anything to Chu Mu. After 10 breaths of battle, no, it should be said that it was a massacre, everything was over. 133 demonic cloud wolves fell into a pool of blood, and all of them died. Chu Mu shook off the blood on his sword and sheathed it. He glanced at the battle record sword token, and immediately revealed a smile. 924 points. In other words, Chu Mu had earned a total of 860 battle points from slaughtering the demonic cloud wolves this time. More than 100 demonic cloud wolves died under his sword, and the other 30 or so died under the swords of Tantiliuguang, Tu Gang and Qin Shanha. Because Tantiliuguang's speed was fast enough, he killed a few more demonic cloud wolves than Tu Gang and Qin Shanha. Captain, I heard that the demonic cloud wolf skin is very valuable, Tu Gang said. Peel it off, Chu Mu said. Based on their guesses, they more or less understood that the demonic cloud wolf, this kind of special immemorial beast, would definitely be more valuable. The 4 of them immediately started, and even the indifferent Tantiliuguang did the same. Each of their movements were very practiced. Chu Mu also summoned Bawang, and let Bawang swallow the essence of the demonic cloud wolf's flesh after peeling off one. Not long after, Chu Mu and the others had harvested more than 100 demonic cloud wolf's skin. Bawang also burped, and was summoned back into the beast space by Chu Mu to digest the energy it had devoured. After doing all this, Tu Gang and the other 2 stared at Chu Mu. Recalling Chu Mu's actions just now, they couldn't help but exclaim from their hearts. His speed was extremely fast, and his attack power was extremely terrifying. His mental power was also indescribably strong. Otherwise, how could he not be affected by the demonic cloud patterns of more than 100 demonic cloud wolves? Let's go, continue to look for targets to kill, Chu Mu said. This time, he decided to earn more battle points. After returning to the Sky Edge Sword Palace, he would try his best to cultivate for a while. Taking a step forward, just as he was about to leave this place, a sense of danger welled up in his heart, and the stars in his mind flickered crazily. Without any thought, relying solely on his body's instincts, Chu Mu abruptly leapt high into the air. At the same time, a sharp black light shot out from the ground below and shot towards Chu Mu like a maggot in a tarsal bone. That black ray carried a strange and cold aura. In an instant, the black ray caught up with Chu Mu, attempting to pierce through Chu Mu. 7th Revolution Sword Intent and 7th Revolution Metal Profound condensed, and pointed downwards. A golden ray broke through the air, colliding with the black ray. Pa pa pa! The black ray was shattered, and the golden ray became weaker. In a flash, it shot into the ground below and exploded. The moment Chu Mu was attacked, Qin Shanha and the other 2 reacted quickly, leaping up into the air with their swords in their hands. Their eyes flickered as they stared at the ground below. With one leap, they reached 100 meters in the air. Carrying the sword Origin, they used their qi to lighten their bodies. Like a feather, they slowly floated down. It would take some time for them to land on the ground. Captain, it might be someone from the Earth Demon Clan, Tu Gang said. Earth Demon Clan. Chu Mu's eyes flashed with a trace of contemplation. The human race was declining, and the current immemorial world was ruled by three major races: the Divine Underworld Clan, the Heavenly Demon Clan, and the Earth Demon Clan. The bloodlines of the three major races were powerful. Although they were not as numerous as the human race, they all had their own talents, shocking potential, and profound fighting strength. They were very terrifying, and the number of geniuses they had far surpassed the human race. It was also because of this that the human race had a hard time developing after their decline. The three major races did not allow them to suppress the human race in all aspects, and to prevent the human race from developing. Otherwise, once the human race regained its glory, it would most likely suppress the three major races. This was not a situation they wanted to see. Chu Mu had killed members of the Heavenly Demon Clan before. The innate talent of the Heavenly Demon Clan was the Heavenly Demon Transformation. After performing it, their power would be doubled, and the side effects were not severe. As for the Earth Demon Clan, according to the records, their innate talent was the Earth Escape. They could move freely under the ground. Whether it was sneak attacks or running away, it was very useful. If the Heavenly Demon Clan was the strongest warrior who could break through enemy lines, then the Earth Demon Clan was the assassin who could move in the dark. Chapter 724. It was very likely that the Earth Demon Clan was hiding in the ground below, concealing their presence and making it difficult for others to detect them. Chu Mu's group of 4 slowly floated down. No matter how slow they would eventually reach the ground. They were sure that the moment they touched the ground, the Earth Demon Clan would launch another attack. A tyrannical mental power broke out of his body and swept down like lightning, directly penetrating into the ground below. Under the penetration of Chu Mu's mental power, the ground couldn't obstruct it at all. 10 meters away, Chu Mu didn't discover anything and continued to go deeper. Immediately, a smile appeared on Chu Mu's face. In a flash, he had already found the Earth Demon Clan's location. They were quietly hiding in the ground, waiting for Chu Mu's group to land so that they could launch a fatal attack. A dozen meters of ground was nothing to the Earth Demon Clan, who had the innate talent of Earth Escape. It was as if it existed in name only. Those Earth Demon Clan members didn't realize that their position had been detected by Chu Mu. It was all because Chu Mu's mental power was purer and more tyrannical than theirs. In an instant, Chu Mu transmitted his voice to Tu Gang and the other two, telling them to cooperate. The moment they landed, Tu Gang, Qin Shanhe, and Tantai Liuguang's figures slid outwards. Underground, the Earth Demon Clan members also moved accordingly. Chu Mu suddenly accelerated his landing. A tyrannical force instantly passed through the tip of his foot, guided by the mountain-piercing energy, and penetrated the ground. At the same time, the Earth Demon Clan member who had been targeting Chu Mu moved over. His attack condensed into a point, turning into a cold and eerie black light. With a full-force attack, he penetrated the ground and shot towards Chu Mu. The Earth Demon Clan member's attack could ignore the obstruction of the ground and didn't decrease in the slightest. The black light collided with Chu Mu's attack. Chu Mu's attack was just a casual attack, and he didn't expect it to injure the Earth Demon Clan member. Therefore, under the Earth Demon Clan member's black light, it was defeated, but it also caused the black light to pause for a moment. Chu Mu's spiritual consciousness had been paying close attention all this time. He grasped the opportunity to strike. The 8-sided desolate heaven sword stabbed into the ground in an extremely ferocious manner. The hard ground was as fragile as tofu, and in an instant, the hilt of the sword was completely submerged. The 7th Revolution sword intent and the 7th Revolution metal profound condensed into one, and the limit of realm advancement erupted. The mountain-piercing energy was directly injected into the sword, and it penetrated several meters of the ground, heading towards the Earth Demon clansmen who were rapidly moving upwards. This Earth Demon race clansman's calculations were very good. After the black light disappeared, he immediately chased after Chu Mu and launched a series of attacks to kill him, leaving no chance for survival. However, he did not expect Chu Mu's mental conception to be so powerful that he could see all of his actions. With a piercing sound, Chu Mu's sword light instantly broke through the Earth Demon Race clansman's defenses. It drilled through his head and out his tailbone, piercing through his entire body and killing him. It had to be said that this Earth Demon clansman had died an unjust death. The remaining 3 Earth Demon Race clansmen had nowhere to hide under Chu Mu's spiritual consciousness. He cooperated with the other members of the Zhen Tian battle team and killed them one by one. In the end, Chu Mu suddenly felt a terrifying killing intent lock onto him, causing his hair to stand on end. It was as if it was an illusion, and the killing intent disappeared in a flash. There's still one more. Chu Mu waited with rapt attention, but he did not suffer any attacks. His intuition told him that the last Earth Demon Race clansman, who was also the most terrifying one, should have left because he did not have the confidence to deal with Chu Mu. The 4 dead Earth Demon Race clansmen all had the strength of a 6th Revolution swordsman. They were relatively ordinary, but when they hid underground and attacked, even a peak 6th Revolution swordsman would be hit. The 4 Earth Demon Race clansmen all died under Chu Mu's sword, giving Chu Mu 128 battle points. 1,052 battle points. The corpses of the 4 Earth Demon Race clansmen were placed on the ground. The Heavenly Demon Race clansmen's bodies were similar to humans, but after the Heavenly Demon transformation, they would grow bigger. The Earth Demon Race clansmen, on the other hand, were more like dwarves, with a height of 1 or 2 meters. They had dark skin, thin bodies, and a relatively large head with short black hair. Their nose was sharp like an eagle's hook, and their eyes were sunken, their pupils were deep, and their teeth were sharp. The Earth Demon Race clansman's appearance was very easy to recognize. The 4 Earth Demon Race clansmen all had spatial rings. Chu Mu and the other 3 each had one, and each of them had gained something. Suddenly, a subtle killing intent came through the void, causing Chu Mu to be startled and squint his eyes. Someone wants to kill me, and he can make me feel threatened. While he was thinking, a figure appeared and approached at a speed faster than the speed of sound. Quickly retreat. Chu Mu made a prompt decision and shouted. His body moved, and he ran to the other side. Tu Gang and the other 2 were startled at first, but when they saw Chu Mu's movement and the figure that was flying towards them, their eyes flashed with determination. Immediately, they chased after Chu Mu. Tantai Liuguang's speed was the fastest, even faster than Chu Mu's. Therefore, she quickly caught up with Chu Mu. "Why are you here?" Chu Mu was surprised. "I am a member of the Zhen Tian battle team." Tantai Liuguang's tone was indifferent. "I am also a member of the Zhen Tian battle team." Tu Gang roared. "I am one of the founders of the Zhen Tian battle team, the vice-captain." Qin Shanhe also shouted. "Then you will be buried with Chu Mu." A voice filled with killing intent swept over like a cold wind, causing people's hearts to tremble. The Golden Yanlei finally caught up with them. In a flash, the Golden Yanlei appeared in front of Chu Mu and the other 3. An enormous aura spread out, repelling the surrounding air. It locked onto Chu Mu and the other 3, and also locked the space around them. The tyrannical divine thought swept across. Under the combination of the aura, Tantai Liuguang, Tu Gang, and Qin Shanhe immediately felt pressured. Their expressions changed, and they mobilized their spiritual will to resist. The speed of their blood flow was greatly reduced, and even their sword energies were restrained, greatly reducing their power. Even a genius like Tantai Liuguang was so powerless against a god condensation realm swordsman. Among the 4, only Chu Mu could resist the aura and divine thought attack brought by the Golden Yanlei. His 3 mind stars kept flashing, and the 7 Revolution Sword Will and 7 Revolution Gold Ultimacy were not affected by the sword energies in his body. "Chu Mu, you are indeed powerful. Time after time, you have exceeded my expectations." Unknowingly, you have become so powerful. If I let you continue to grow, you may become a threat to me. The golden Yanlei's face was cold, and his eyes were filled with chilling murderous intent. He stared at Chu Mu, as if he wanted to use his eyes to pierce through Chu Mu's body. Seeing that Chu Mu wasn't affected at all by his aura and mental attack, Jean Yanlei's heart rang with alarm. His fear of Chu Mu skyrocketed, and he decided that he had to kill Chu Mu while he was still weak in order to get rid of future troubles. Otherwise, once Chu Mu was allowed to grow and break through to the God condensation realm, his strength would definitely increase by leaps and bounds. At that time, he would not be able to do anything to Chu Mu. True geniuses would always deepen their foundation, accumulating more and more, which made it harder for them to break through. But once they broke through, their strength would increase by leaps and bounds, surpassing others. The golden Yanlei definitely could not leave a threat in his heart. There is more that you have not expected. Chu Mu replied, his tone serious. The aura that the golden Yanlei emitted let him know that it was even stronger than the God condensation realm evil path swordsman that he had killed before. When one's cultivation reached the God condensation realm, there was a clear difference between the entry level and the peak of the entry level. I wonder if my 7th revolution sword intent and 7th revolution metal profound can deal with the golden Yanlei. Chu Mu thought to himself. Then, he sent a message to Qin Shanhe and the other two. If there is a chance, the 3 of you should leave immediately. The golden Yanlei cannot kill me. Tu Gang and Tantai Liuguang both knew that the other was a God condensation realm swordsman. They also knew how terrifying a God condensation realm swordsman was. At this time, they could only bitterly resist. They could not answer, but their eyes were resolute. Don't worry. A few months ago, I killed a God condensation realm evil path swordsman. At that time, my sword intent and metal profound were only at the 6th revolution level. Chu Mu understood the other's eyes. He quickly explained, now that my sword intent and metal profound have both reached the 7th revolution, combined with a secret technique, even if I cannot kill the golden Yanlei, I can still heavily injure him. Qin Shanhe personally saw you kill the God condensation realm evil path swordsman, Chu Mu quickly added. Qin Shanhe did not say anything. He only moved his eyes, indicating that this was indeed the case. So you must believe that the golden Yanlei cannot do anything to me. Don't interfere, Chu Mu finally said. After finishing, Chu Mu believed that they could understand and make the right choice. Golden Yanlei, among them, there are disciples of the Hongtian sect and the Tantai clan's number 1 God condensation realm disciple. Their identities are extraordinary. If anything happens to them, the Hongtian sect and Tantai clan will not let this matter rest. At that time, no matter how strong the Demon Slayer battle team is, it will not be enough. Chu Mu revealed a cold smile and said to the golden Yanlei. Golden Yanlei's expression instantly changed. He never thought that there was such an identity. Indeed, he could see that these two were extraordinary. Such talents were highly valued in the Hongtian sect and Tantai clan. Moreover, who could guarantee that they did not have terrifying life-saving methods? The Hongtian sect and Tantai clan were colossi that could rival the Sky Edge Sword Palace. They were far from what the Demon Slayer battle team could contend against. Just as the golden Yanlei was thinking, Chu Mu made his move. He mobilized all his power and turned it into a terrifying sword light. He slashed with his sword, directly tearing apart the aura and divine perception of the golden Yanlei. His body turned into a golden light and rushed towards the golden Yanlei, slashing his throat. It had to be said that Chu Mu's actions were very bold. It was completely out of the golden Yanlei's expectations. He felt that Chu Mu should be thinking of ways to escape from him. However, Chu Mu actually took the initiative to attack him. A surge of anger surged from the bottom of his heart. There seemed to be flames burning in his eyes. The golden Yanlei stretched out a finger and slowly pointed. There were various kinds of tyrannical energy condensed on this finger. Chapter 725. This finger contained sword yuan, sword intent, profound energy, and divine will. The world in front of Chu Mu seemed to vanish. Only that finger was rapidly expanding, filling his eyes. He changed his sword style, stabbing at that finger. Sword yuan, sword intent, metal profound, and mountain-shaking energy were all infused. Chu Mu only felt his sword tremble, and a terrifying power was instantly transmitted to him. It almost flew out of his hand. He quickly increased his strength and tightened his grip, causing his arm to tremble as well. He hurriedly dispelled it and used the momentum to retreat. However, a trace of divine remembrance rushed into his mental world. Chu Mu hurriedly mobilized his mental intent and shattered it at the cost of several times the consumption. Jin Yanlei's finger trembled, and his expression changed. In that instant of contact, he felt a terrifying sharpness pierce through the power at the tip of his finger. His finger was pierced, and a drop of blood naturally seeped out. If he had the protection of divine will, that sword probably would have crippled his finger. Jin Yanlei's finger also made Chu Mu feel his strength. The divine condensation realm evil path swordsman he had killed earlier had only just broken through to the divine condensation realm, so he hadn't learned how to properly use divine will. But Jin Yanlei was different. He had already been in the divine condensation realm for several years, and had even reached the peak of the divine condensation realm. He was very familiar with the use of divine will. A true divine condensation realm swordsman could fuse divine will into every action, making it even more powerful. Your sword intent and metal profound have both reached the 7th revolution. Jin Yanlei narrowed his eyes and his tone became calm. A terrifying chill condensed in his pupils, and killing intent filled the air. Sword intent and metal profound had reached the 7th revolution. This meant that Chu Mu's soul was extremely powerful. At the very least, he was the strongest among all the Sky Edge Sword Palace disciples. He was also the only one who had refined both sword intent and profound to the 7th revolution. There was a clear difference between the 6th revolution and the 7th revolution. It was said that once the sword intent reached the 7th revolution, the sharpness would multiply. It would not only increase the purity of the sword intent, but also its power. Previously, Chu Mu had only made Golden Flame Thunder feel a bit of fear. But now, after learning that Chu Mu had the 7th revolution sword intent and the 7th revolution metal profound, the fear in Golden Flame Thunder's heart quietly turned into fear, and even terror. The moment the fear appeared, the Golden Flame Lightning immediately sensed it. His murderous intent soared, and his determination to kill Chu Mu intensified. Because before, he only felt that once Chu Mu broke through to the divine condensation realm, he would be very powerful and very likely be a threat to him. Now, he was 100% sure that once Chu Mu broke through to the divine condensation realm, he would definitely be able to kill him. In order to not lose his life in the future, in order to not give birth to inner demons, in order to walk further on the path of a swordsman, in order to become stronger, he had to kill Chu Mu, and now, after dispersing the rebound force, Chu Mu swung his sword. The extreme sword light broke through the air and slashed towards Golden Flame Thunder. If it was any other swordsman below the divine condensation realm, Golden Flame Thunder wouldn't care about such a sword. But his opponent was Chu Mu, a person who made him feel fear and even fear. Golden Flame Thunder didn't take it head-on. His figure flashed and dodged Chu Mu's extreme sword light. Subsequently, he turned into a stream of light and shot towards Chu Mu. The sword appeared in his hand. The sharpness was restrained, and it caused Chu Mu's soul to tremble. Without hesitation, Chu Mu immediately retreated after swinging his sword. He used his fastest speed to escape and ran far away. Golden Flame Thunder's heart was already filled with the thought of killing Chu Mu. He couldn't tolerate anything else and directly ignored Qin Shanhe and the other two. In his heart, although the three of them had decent talents, they were still unable to pose a threat to him. As for Tu Gang and Tantai Liuguang's identities, he didn't make a move to deal with them. They wouldn't be able to borrow the strength of the Hongtian sect and Tantai clan to deal with him. The Sky Edge Sword Palace wouldn't be a bystander. In short, killing Chu Mu was the most important thing. Once Golden Flame Thunder left, Tu Gang and the other two regained their mobility. They only felt that their bodies were a little weak, as though they had overexerted their strength. The three of them didn't say anything and immediately adjusted their breathing to recover their strength. Chu Mu's speed was displayed to the extreme. He was like a white shadow that flashed by and flew far away. While he was running at full speed, he was thinking about the feeling when he clashed with Golden Flame Thunder's finger. He was able to multitask. Therefore, even if he was thinking at the same time, it wouldn't affect his speed. Golden Flame Thunder's finger kept replaying in Chu Mu's mind. What he cared about wasn't the profundity of the Golden Flame Thunder finger. In reality, to Chu Mu, he could have done it even better. What he truly cared about was the power contained within the finger. Sword essence, sword intent, and power of quintessence were all normal. Only the power of divine perception was out of Chu Mu's expectations. The power of divine perception was a higher level of mental energy after the mental intent had undergone a qualitative change. It had unimaginable power. However, Chu Mu didn't expect that when mental energy reached the level of divine perception, it could be attached to the fingers or even the sword to form an attack. When the power of divine perception was fused with other types of energy, it could impact the opponent's mental world and cause mental damage. The power of divine perception was of a higher level than the power of will. Therefore, primordial realm swordsmen wouldn't be able to withstand the impact of a divine condensation realm swordsman's divine perception, resulting in the collapse of their mental world and death. Chu Mu thought that if the power of divine perception could be fused with other types of energy to form an attack, then could the power of will be able to do the same? Of course, Chu Mu wasn't the first person to have such thoughts. Before him, many years ago, there were many swordsmen who had considered this question. There were also many swordsmen who had devoted themselves to researching this question, but to no avail. In the end, it was announced that they had failed. Only when a swordsman broke through to the divine condensation realm and transformed his mental intent into divine perception could he truly fuse the power of divine perception with other types of energy. This became the gap between the primordial realm and the divine condensation realm, a gap that couldn't be crossed. If I can use the power of will like the power of divine perception, my strength will definitely increase by a lot. Chu Mu's eyes lit up as he thought to himself. He still wasn't sure if his limit was the 8th transformation or the 9th transformation. In short, no matter what, he was bound to stay in the primordial realm for a period of time, perhaps a few years. A few years wasn't a long time, but it wasn't a short time either. During this period of time, he might encounter all sorts of challenges and dangers. If he could increase his strength again, it would be a good thing. However, many swordsmen, many of whom were extremely talented, spent a lot of time researching, but still couldn't use the power of will like the power of divine perception. No matter how monstrous Chu Mu was, he couldn't do it in a short period of time. Perhaps, no matter how hard he tried, he wouldn't be able to do it. But no matter what, Chu Mu decided that he would set aside some time in the future to research it properly. Once he succeeded, it would be incredible. Jin Yanlei's speed was even faster than Chu Mu's, and he was constantly closing in. The sharp backstab made Chu Mu feel even more pressured. However, he had great confidence in himself. The 7th transformation Sword Will, the 7th transformation Gold Profound, and the small success Burning Blood Change. Jin Yanlei wanted to kill Chu Mu, but how could Chu Mu not want to kill Jin Yanlei? It was just a matter of time. Not long after, Jin Yanlei caught up and launched an attack. Sword light containing the power of divine perception tore through the air. Being guided by the power of divine perception, his aura locked onto Chu Mu. Each of his sword light was aimed at Chu Mu. They were like a torrential rain. Not only could divine perception fuse with other energies, but it could also lock onto its target, making it difficult for any of his attacks to miss. Chu Mu was shocked, but his expression was as calm as ever. His speed exploded, and he changed positions, causing the sword light to miss. A strange scene appeared. Jin Yanlei's eyes exploded with light. His sword danced in the air, and his sword light changed directions, once more shooting toward Chu Mu. This was the power of a true divine condensation swordsman. That corrupt divine condensation swordsman Chu Mu had killed before couldn't even count as a true divine condensation swordsman. Chu Mu's understanding of divine condensation swordsman was too lacking. He immediately fell into a predicament. Facing over a dozen of Jin Yanlei's sword light attacks was a bit troublesome. Let alone a dozen, even if there were 100 sword lights, Chu Mu would be able to shatter them one by one. The problem was that each of those sword lights contained a trace of divine perception. Chu Mu truly could shatter those sword lights, but his sword intent could only erase a portion of the divine perception. The other portion would invade his mental world. If Chu Mu was able to merge his mental intent into the various energies and truly become one, he would be able to easily shatter these 12 sword glows. In that instant, Chu Mu's power erupted once more, and he charged at Jin Yanlei. Jin Yanlei snorted coldly, and with a wave of his sword, the 12 sword lights shot toward Chu Mu. Chu Mu instantly transformed several times, and Jin Yanlei also waved his sword, causing those sword lights to transform as well. They chased after Chu Mu at an extremely fast speed. Seeing Chu Mu rapidly approaching, Jin Yanlei sneered. His sword suddenly stabbed out, and a terrifying sword light pierced through the air toward Chu Mu's chest. A pincer attack. With no other choice, Chu Mu could only release the limit of his sword light. The sword light was an attack from a distance. Unless Jin Yanlei's divine perception had reached a godly level, he wouldn't be able to follow the attack into Chu Mu's mental world. As soon as he attacked, Chu Mu didn't hold back at all. In an instant, 13 sword lights appeared, 1 in front of him and 12 behind him. Popping sounds rang out continuously, and Jin Yanlei's sword lights shattered one after another. His divine perception lost its support and naturally dissipated. With the increase in his strength, Chu Mu's divine perception strength increased once more, reaching 15 sword lights. 15 sword lights was his limit. Under such circumstances, Chu Mu wouldn't push himself to that limit, or else it would be very disadvantageous for him. 13 sword lights in a row was still within his tolerance range. Chapter 726. Jin Yanlei was stunned. He had already thought highly of Chu Mu, but Chu Mu had once again exceeded his expectations. Using such a simple, violent, and effective method, he had broken through his attack. Chu Mu grasped the opportunity. His body tore through the air as he approached Jin Yanlei. His sword swiped towards Jin Yanlei's throat. Jin Yanlei felt goosebumps on his throat. He reacted quickly. He gathered his divine sense and forced it out of his eyes. It shot into Chu Mu's spiritual world, causing Chu Mu's movements to pause slightly. Jin Yanlei mobilized his powerful spiritual will and destroyed the divine sense that had invaded his spiritual world. It was only a short time, but Jin Yanlei had already adjusted himself. He did not retreat but instead advanced. His sword stabbed towards Chu Mu's heart. Sword technique domain activated. Jin Yanlei's sword technique domain had reached the peak of the 5th level. He was on par with Chu Mu. The two sword technique domains collided with each other, distorting each other and canceling each other out. The sword light flickered, appearing and disappearing. Sometimes there was no sound, and sometimes there was a sharp, hair-raising sound. It left clear tracks in the air. Their bodies intertwined and their feet shifted. In just 10 breaths, Chu Mu and Jin Yanlei had exchanged more than 100 blows. Neither of them could do anything to the other. In terms of strength, Jin Yanlei was stronger than Chu Mu. In terms of battle talent and sword technique application, Chu Mu was above Jin Yanlei. Jin Yanlei did not dare to add his divine sense to every sword. The divine sense of a god condensation realm swordsman was indeed very strong, but it was still limited. Jin Yanlei was only at the peak of the god condensation realm. He did not have outstanding talent in the soul. Therefore, before he reached the god condensation realm, his spiritual will was only a little purer than an ordinary swordsman's. That was all. Previously, he had used his divine sense to attack Chu Mu several times. He had already used up most of his divine sense. He could not do anything to Chu Mu. He was looking for an opportunity to launch a fatal attack to avoid wasting his divine sense. Jin Yanlei's heart was in turmoil. Chu Mu was more difficult to deal with than he had imagined. In a battle of swordsmanship, every sword contained terrifying power. Once hit, even if one did not die, he would be severely injured. However, he could not suppress Chu Mu in terms of swordsmanship. Once a swordsman broke through to the god-congealing realm, his spiritual consciousness would transform into divine thought, and the power of his profound meaning would increase as well. In other words, the same rank 6 profound meaning would have a clear difference in power between a origin realm swordsman and a god condensation realm swordsman. However, the golden flame thunder's profound was rank 6, which was his limit. The limit of his soul wouldn't change, just because he broke through to the god condensation realm. On the other hand, Chu Mu's sword intent and profound meaning had both reached rank 7, which smoothed out the gap between spiritual consciousness and divine thought. In addition to the mountain-trembling force and mountain-piercing force, every attack was even more powerful. Under the situation where Jin Yanlei did not use divine thought, he was able to gain a slight advantage. Damn it, if my control of strength reached the realm of man and sword, I would be able to have a sword technique and easily kill Chu Mu. Jin Yanlei was extremely angry in his heart. He had been stuck at the limit entry realm for many years. Now that he had reached the peak, he could not break through. Even though he knew the next level of the limit entry realm and knew how to break through, he still could not do it. Everything was limited by his own talent. Looks like I have no choice but to use my secret technique, Jin Yanlei said to himself. Using a secret technique often had side effects. One had to pay a price. Therefore, it was best not to use it. In the beginning, Jin Yanlei did not plan to use his secret technique. However, Chu Mu was more difficult to deal with than he had expected. His eyes shone brightly as his divine thought attacked Chu Mu. In an instant, it entered Chu Mu's spiritual world. Jin Yanlei did not attack again. Instead, he quickly retreated. When Chu Mu used his powerful mental remembrance to defeat the invading divine remembrance, the golden flame thunder had already retreated several hundred meters away. The sword was stabbed into the ground, and as he waved his hands, the surrounding air was affected, creating layers of distorted ripples that spread outwards. A powerful energy condensed within the golden flame thunder's body and began to appear. Jin Yanlei could feel the power condensing in his body. It was as if it had formed a second heart. It started to beat violently. Every time he used this secret technique, he would feel excited. The feeling of power emerging from the deepest part of his body and filling his entire body was very refreshing. The surrounding air seemed to tremble because of the power bursting out of Jin Yanlei's body. Chu Mu was shocked. A terrifying aura was condensing in Jin Yanlei's body. Secret technique, Chu Mu muttered. A cold light flashed in his eyes. Originally, he did not plan to use his secret technique. The level of the heaven-burying secret technique was too low. It was not enough. It could not increase his strength. Only the burning blood transformation was left. Without hesitation, Chu Mu also used his secret technique, the burning blood transformation. Otherwise, once Jin Yanlei successfully used his secret technique, his strength would increase greatly. It would be very disadvantageous for him. His blood essence instantly boiled and burned. A powerful force rushed out like a water pump, filling his body. The swelling feeling made Chu Mu feel that he could shatter the sky with one punch. A blood-red mist appeared outside his body. A layer of it burned like a faint flame. A faint smell of blood spread out. After Jin Yanlei used his secret technique, the air around him became slightly distorted. Chu Mu, die! With a roar, Jin Yanlei's hair and beard fluttered. He suddenly jumped up, holding his sword with both hands. He descended with a posture that could split the sky and earth, slashing at Chu Mu. The one who will die is you. Chu Mu sneered. He raised his head and waved his left hand. His whole body soared up and his sword slashed out. Their bodies passed by each other and landed on the ground. Without any hesitation, his power erupted again as he rushed at his opponent. Secret techniques all had a time limit. Once the time limit was up, the user would be weakened. This was the first side effect. Therefore, one had to kill his opponent before the time limit was up. Then, one could quickly take the corresponding medicinal pellet to alleviate the side effect. At this moment, no one wanted to die. Everyone wanted to kill their opponent. Fight, fight, fight. Kill, kill, kill. Chu Mu's sword, Jin Yanlei's sword, displayed a terrifying sharpness in the bloody wasteland. Tu Gang and the other two had already recovered their strength. They quickly chased over, but did not get close. They could see the two parties fighting from 10,000 meters away. The figure that was wrapped in a weak blood-red flame and the other figure that was surrounded by distorted air collided with each other again and again. The tyrannical impact caused the aftershocks to wreak havoc. Even though the sound was very far away, it was still transmitted into their ears. The three of them were dumbfounded. Even though Qin Shanhe had already seen the scene of Chu Mu fighting a God Condensation Realm swordsman, and even though Chu Mu himself had said that he could fight a God Condensation Realm swordsman, when the truth appeared before their eyes, Tu Gang and Tantai Liuguang could not suppress the shock in their hearts. There was an uncrossable gap between the God Condensation Realm and the Origin Realm. At least, they had never heard of such a monster appearing in the Xiling continent. They could not participate in such a battle because they were too weak. Once they got close, they would be killed by the aftershock. They could only place their hopes on Chu Mu, and hope that Chu Mu could defeat his opponent. His heart could not help but be nervous. His palms were sweating. The golden flame thunder unceasingly attacked. Each sword would explode with extremely terrifying power the moment they touched. However, Chu Mu's every sword also exploded with terrifying power. In fact, they were even stronger than the golden flame thunder. The burning blood change was a profound secret art left behind by the burning blood sword of Gojoseon. It was even more advanced than the secret art that Jin Yanlei practiced. Naturally, after using it, one's strength would increase significantly. Jin Yanlei's heart was extremely sullen. He originally thought that by using the secret art, he would be able to crush Chu Mu. He did not expect that Chu Mu would also use a secret art. Moreover, it seemed to be a secret art that was even more powerful than his. The more powerful the secret art, the greater the consumption and the more obvious the side effects. No matter how talented Chu Mu is, he is only an Origin Realm swordsman. It is impossible for him to maintain such a powerful secret art for a long time. I can deal with him until the secret art ends. At that time, it will be his death. Jin Yanlei calmed down and said to himself. He immediately changed his battle strategy. He adopted a wandering stance. Chu Mu immediately knew what his opponent was thinking. He could not help but sneer in his heart. Indeed, the consumption of using the burning blood change was not small. However, Chu Mu's essence blood was more vigorous than ordinary swordsmen because of the Sky Desolation sword body. He could sustain it for a longer time. Jin Yanlei switched from attacking to defending and wandering, which immediately provided an opportunity for Chu Mu to attack crazily. The speed of his sword was extremely fast. Occasionally there would be an explosion of the origin realm. The power was incomparably strong. Every sword contained an extreme amount of mountain-trembling energy. Under the burning blood change state, the burning of essence blood gave the feeling of power gushing out from a high-powered water pump. It was like a poppy that made people addicted to it. His spiritual consciousness also became more active because of the excitement. The active spiritual consciousness had greater vitality. The control of power became smoother. Even vaguely, Chu Mu could feel that the power of his spiritual consciousness seemed to show signs of merging with other powers. This caused the power of every sword to increase. However, under such a state, Chu Mu could not calm down to think. He could not be sure if this was real or just an illusion. As the sword slashed down, Jin Yanlei, who could not dodge, raised his sword to block. This sword suddenly exploded with a terrifying power, causing Jin Yanlei's sword to sink down. Following that, Chu Mu's wrist turned and his sword appeared below Jin Yanlei's sword. His power exploded once again as he flicked his sword upward. Taking advantage of the momentum, the sword swept past Jin Yanlei's fingers. The pain caused him to loosen his grip on the sword. Jin Yanlei's sword flew upwards. Following that, Chu Mu's sword pierced towards Jin Yanlei's heart. Jin Yanlei was shocked and quickly dodged. However, he was still unable to avoid being pierced through the chest. The sword passed close to his heart. The coldness almost froze his heart. A terrifying sharpness invaded his heart, causing him to feel an intense pain as if his heart was being torn apart. Heavily injured, fear surged from the bottom of his heart. Jin Yanlei's pupils dilated. He only kept a small portion of his spiritual consciousness to prevent himself from fainting. The rest was instantly blasted out. Following that, he did not even care about the sword that was falling down. He used his full speed and power. With a boom, dust flew into the air as he fled like a cannonball. Chapter 727. Chu Mu, just you wait. I will kill you with my own hands. His voice resounded in the air. It was a furious roar. Jin Yanlei's figure flew away at a speed several times faster than the speed of sound. Chu Mu didn't have the time to pay attention to it. The Golden Flame Thunder's final divine remembrance attack had brought him some trouble. His mental remembrance was completely mobilized. The three consciousnesses flashed crazily, and the powerful mental remembrance condensed into a sword of remembrance. In his mental world, it cut down the Golden Flame Thunder's divine remembrance. After 3 breaths, Jin Yanlei's mind power had been destroyed. Chu Mu's mind power had also been greatly depleted. The 3 mind stars had become somewhat dim. Chu Mu hurriedly stopped the burning blood transformation. His essence blood stopped burning. A sense of weakness spread throughout his body. He hurriedly took out the golden vein blood yang pill and consumed it. This fight was extremely dangerous. If he wasn't careful, he could have died under the Golden Flame Thunder's sword. Fortunately, Chu Mu had the upper hand in the end, and because the Golden Flame Thunder was wounded, it had disregarded everything and attacked with its divine remembrance in order to stop Chu Mu and give itself a chance to escape. If he had attacked with all his might at that time, he might have had a 20 to 30% chance of killing Chu Mu. However, he would have had to pay a great price. In an emergency, Jin Yanlei could not care less. He chose to escape. Although he was very wary and afraid of Chu Mu and wanted to kill Chu Mu, he still lacked a sense of ruthlessness at the crucial moment. He did not have the determination to fight to the death. Captain Qin Shanhe and the other 2 hurriedly ran over. I'm fine, said Chu Mu. His voice was weak and his face was pale. Because he had used up a lot of essence blood, it was fortunate that the golden patterned blood yang pill's medicinal effects had spread out and quickly replenished the essence blood he had used up, causing Chu Mu's weakness to slowly disappear. Captain, don't worry and recover, Tu Geng said. The 3 of them formed a triangle and surrounded Chu Mu to protect him. Chu Mu sat down cross-legged and channeled his martial arts to recover his various powers. His spiritual consciousness, sword origin, blood essence, and so on were all recovering rapidly. A few hours passed and the sky turned dark. Chu Mu had finally recovered. His fatigue was gone and he was full of energy. Captain, Jin Yanlei is not dead. In the future, he will definitely come again. Qin Shanhe felt a sense of danger in his heart. Furthermore, he is one of the elders of the Demon Slayer squad. If he mobilizes the Demon Slayer squad's power. Tu Gang and Tantai Liuguang did not say anything, but they also felt a sense of crisis. It wasn't a good thing to be remembered by a God Condensation Realm swordsman, especially when that God Condensation Realm swordsman was an elder of an organization that had many God Condensation Realm swordsmen. Golden Flame Thunder has already been severely injured by my sword. Adding the side effects of using the secret technique and the consumption of his divine sense, it will be very difficult for him to recover in a short period of time. Chu Mu said slowly, I estimate that for at least 3 months, he will only be recovering and won't have the time to find trouble with us. Furthermore, if Golden Flame Thunder wants to go further on the path of the sword, he probably won't use the Demon Slayer squad's power to deal with me. He hates me to the bone, and I have already become a shadow in his heart. I might even be a demon in his heart. Therefore, killing me with his own hands is the best way. Chu Mu analyzed. No matter what, Golden Flame Thunder will definitely try to deal with me again, no matter what method he uses. However, we should be safe for a while. Chu Mu continued, therefore we should use this time to hunt with all our might and earn more battle points. After returning to the Sword Palace, even if he wants to, he won't be able to deal with us. Furthermore, I can take the initiative to attack. As he spoke, Chu Mu's lips curled into a smile. He had thought of a way to temporarily restrain Golden Flame Thunder, but he wasn't sure if it would be effective. Chu Mu's analysis was somewhat reasonable. Everyone didn't say anything more. They only inwardly mustered up their strength. They had to make themselves stronger. Otherwise, the next time they encountered something like this, they would once again become bystanders or even burdens. Such a feeling, to geniuses like them, was very unfamiliar and terrible. It was extremely unbearable. Hunt, 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 hunt. The Crimson Wasteland became the slaughterhouse of Chu Mu's group. The battle points in the battle record soared at his waist sword. Other than not using Burning Blood transformation, Chu Mu used his full strength. He remembered the feeling of using Burning Blood transformation at the end in his intense battle with the Golden Flame Thunder. It seemed that he could truly merge with other powers, causing his sword's might to become even stronger. However, he couldn't do it. Chu Mu wasn't willing to use the Burning Blood transformation again, because he couldn't guarantee that it would succeed. The price of using the Burning Blood transformation was too great. On the Crimson Wasteland, ancient vicious beasts, blood demons, and foreign races were crazily slaughtered. Corpses littered the ground. The name of the Zhentian battle team spread far and wide. They had become a thorn in the flesh in the eyes of the foreign races. When they talked about the Zhentian battle team, their faces changed and they gnashed their teeth. During this period of time, too many people had died under the swords of the Zhentian battle team. Especially the captain of the Zhentian battle team, Chu Mu. His name was more than half. Zhentian battle team. Chu Mu. Wait for me to meditate to harvest you all. In the dark night, a figure appeared. He was like the messenger of the death god. He whispered in a low voice that could steal souls. It's time to go back, Chu Mu said. We have gained a lot this time. After we go back, we can cultivate properly. It's enough for my strength to increase further. Tu Gang laughed. The name of the Zhentian battle team spread far and wide. This also meant that they had gained a lot. Among the 4 of them, Chu Mu had gained the most battle points. He had gained close to 4,000 battle points. Tantai Liuguang was second, with close to 2,000 battle points. Tu Gang was third, with over 1,700 battle points. Qin Shanhe had the least, with over 1,300 battle points. Chu Mu was able to gain so many battle points because his strength was extremely tyrannical. Moreover, he had killed 3 ancient vicious beasts that were comparable to a swordsman in the spirit condensation realm. Each of them had brought him a few hundred battle points. After 20 days, the Zhen Tian battle team returned once again. In the Sky Peak Valley, the way everyone looked at them changed. Unknowingly, there was a trace of respect. Even though the Zhen Tian battle team was only a third-rate battle team, even though they only had 4 members, no one dared to look down on them. Captain, it seems like Jin Yanlei didn't tell the Demon Slayer battle team about this, Qin Shanhe said. It's not that he didn't want to tell us. It's just that we don't know where he's hiding to recuperate. Chu Mu smiled and said, Next, we have to make a big deal out of this. How? The eyes of the 3 lit up. Send this sword and my challenge letter to the Demon Slayer battle team. Spread the news that Jin Yanlei has caused trouble for me many times. Our conflict has intensified to the point where we must fight to the death. 1 year from today, Jin Yanlei and I will fight to the death in the heart of the Crimson Wasteland, Chu Mu said to Qin Shanhe. This way, at least for the next year, the Demon Slayer battle team won't be able to cause trouble for us openly. Tu Gang's eyes lit up as he chuckled. As for the fight to the death between Chu Mu and Jin Yanlei a year later, he wasn't worried at all. The current Chu Mu could severely injure Jin Yanlei and let him escape in a hurry. 1 year later, with his talent, Chu Mu's strength would definitely increase by leaps and bounds. He would become even stronger. Make a big deal out of this. Let Jin Yanlei know about this and agree. Then we can cultivate properly for a while. Chu Mu smiled. This method wasn't clever at all. Many people could think of it. The only difference was whether they dared to think about it and whether they dared to do it. If they didn't dare to do it, no matter how much they thought about it, it would be useless. Don't worry, Captain. I will definitely take care of this matter properly. Qin Shanhe smiled. The 4 of them returned to Chu Mu's sword tower. Chu Mu picked up his brush and wrote a strategy letter. He gave it to Qin Shanhe along with Jin Yanlei's sword. After Qin Shanhe received it, he left the sword tower and went to the Demon Slayer battle team's camp. One could imagine how interesting the expressions of the Demon Slayer battle team's upper echelons would be when they saw Jin Yanlei's sword and the challenge letter. One could also imagine how much of an uproar this news would cause when it spread out. Okay, you guys go make your own arrangements, Chu Mu said to Tu Gang and Tantai Liuguang. Then I will go to the Thousand Evil Valley, Tu Gang said. Tantai Liuguang nodded and didn't say anything. She left with Tu Gang. I have used up all the demonic crystals. My sword essence and gold ultimacy have reached the early stage of the 7th revolution. Chu Mu thought to himself. He rested in the sword tower. When night fell, he went to the stargazing platform. This was because his spiritual consciousness had once again filled his spiritual world. It was time for him to condense the 4th spiritual star. When Qin Shanhe spread the news that Chu Mu had issued a challenge letter to Jin Yanlei, one of the Demon Slayer battle team's elders, there was silence. Everyone thought that they had heard wrong. Who was Jin Yanlei? He was one of the Demon Slayer battle team's elders. He was a powerful swordsman who had been in the God-condensing realm for many years. Among the elite disciples, he was one of the most influential people. And who was Chu Mu? He was the captain of the Zhen Tian battle team. He was powerful and talented. Especially recently, his reputation had spread far and wide. However, he was only an astral realm swordsman. There was an insurmountable gap between the astral realm and the God-condensing realm. After many people confirmed it, they thought that Chu Mu had gone crazy. They thought that he had been blinded by his recent fame and made such a crazy decision. Many people, especially those from the Demon Slayer battle team, thought that Chu Mu was seeking his own death. However, when Qin Shanhe spread the truth, Everyone knew that Jean Yanlei had tried to kill Chu Mu many times. Not long ago, he had personally entered the Crimson Wasteland to kill Chu Mu. However, he had failed to kill Chu Mu. Instead, he had angered Chu Mu. Jean Yanlei had been injured by Chu Mu and had fled, leaving behind his sword. Most people believed the first half of this news and didn't believe the second half. However, no matter what, Chu Mu achieved the effect he wanted. This news was unceasingly spread and created an enormous storm. It caused Chu Mu and the Golden Flame Thunder to become the center of attention and be discussed. However, the Demon Slayer battle team didn't release any specific news because Jean Yanlei hadn't returned yet. Chapter 728. Are you sure? The teacher in charge glanced at Chu Mu and asked lightly. Yes. Chu Mu's tone was very certain. I have faith in you. Live on. The teacher in charge paused and said. Chu Mu nodded and stood up. He saluted the teacher in charge and turned to leave. After becoming an elite disciple, Chu Mu's every move was under the teacher in charge's control. Therefore, the teacher in charge also knew about his challenge to Jean Yanlei and summoned Chu Mu. Jean Yanlei was a God Condensation Realm swordsman, and a peak God Condensation Realm swordsman at that. Chu Mu was only an Origin Realm swordsman. There was a huge gap between the two. Even the teacher in charge himself couldn't bridge this gap back in the day. However, after seeing Chu Mu and talking with Chu Mu for a short while, the teacher in charge had a feeling that perhaps Chu Mu could win. He didn't try to persuade or stop him because he also wanted to see if Chu Mu could defeat Jean Yanlei. Standing at his height and with his knowledge, he naturally knew that there were geniuses in the Origin Realm who could fight against God Condensation Realm. There were even geniuses in the Origin Realm who could kill God Condensation Realm cultivators. It was just that it was relatively rare. If Chu Mu could fight against or even defeat Jean Yanlei, the teacher in charge's eyes couldn't help but light up. Late at night, in the observatory, Chu Mu's spiritual consciousness condensed into a beam and spread 3,000 meters up in the sky. He could clearly feel the power of the stars from the sky same star and draw it into his spiritual world. His spiritual consciousness had been refined once again. Now it was time to condense a mind star. The fourth mind star. Compressing and condensing again and again, his spiritual world was under great pressure again and again. It trembled and almost collapsed. However, Chu Mu ignored it and focused on condensing and compressing with his strong will. With a loud bang, it was as if a star had exploded. Under the stardust, a speck of starlight flickered beside the third thought star. The fourth thought star had been successfully condensed. The four mind stars resonated, and the starlight and spiritual consciousness spread out, hitting the barrier of the spiritual world. Immediately, the barrier of the spiritual world was strengthened and became more stable. At this point, he had cultivated more than half of the Southern Dipper mind refining scripture. His spiritual will was 4 times stronger than before. Chu Mu's 5 senses were also affected by the increase of his spiritual power, and there was a slight increase. After the fourth consciousness star was condensed, Chu Mu's speed in deducing the 8th hand seal of the 9 revolution heavenly shocking seal increased by several times. In order to study this hand seal as soon as possible so that he could temper it to the 8th revolution, Chu Mu temporarily put aside all other cultivation and spent almost 24 hours a day on studying the hand seal. Originally, it would have taken several months to complete the hand seal. However, after increasing the efficiency time and time again, it was finally completed in less than a month. At this time, Qin Shan, He Tu Gang, and Tantai Liuguang had already spent more than a month in the Evil Valley, and each of them had improved. Very good. Since he wants to die, we'll fulfill his wish. In the demon-slaying battle team's encampment, Jean Yanlei's face was ashen. His eyes flashed with a fierce light, and he looked like he was gnashing his teeth. Immediately, he said to the people beside him, "Spread the news. Say that I agree to Chu Mu's challenge." Jin Yanlei responded and agreed to the life and death battle with Chu Mu. This news once again caused a storm of heated discussion. Jin Yanlei. After hearing the news, Chu Mu smiled slightly. He didn't say anything and left the Sword Tower for the Evil Valley. The 8th hand seal of the 9 Revolution Heavenly Shocking Seal was completed. Now, it was time to refine the Sword Intent and Gold Profound. Once his Sword Intent and Metal Profound were refined to the 8th Revolution, his sharpness would be even sharper, and his power would greatly increase. He would become even more terrifying. When that time came, Chu Mu's strength would multiply again. When he faced the golden flame lightning again, he had absolute confidence in winning. Moreover, there was still a lot of time. Chu Mu could continue to improve. Even if Jin Yanlei's strength increased, Chu Mu still had the confidence to cut him down. This was confidence. Confidence in himself, in the sword in his hand, and in his own way of the sword. Entering the Evil Valley, Chu Mu went deeper and deeper. Once again, he came to the place where he found the baleful Yin crystal. A small part of the baleful Yin Qi here had already liquefied. The condensation of the 4th star of consciousness and the slight improvement of the Sword Intent and Gold Profound allowed Chu Mu to go deeper and deeper. After another dozen meters or so, the baleful Yin Qi had already disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by baleful Yin Qi. Waves of baleful Yin Qi rushed over and swept past Chu Mu's body. Even the protective sword aura could not resist it. It was instantly eroded and disappeared. His clothes were also eroded and torn, leaving him naked. Sword origin revolved and covered his entire body. It immediately resisted the baleful Yin Qi, preventing him from being damaged by the baleful Yin Qi. The desolate sky sword body also allowed Chu Mu's body to have a certain degree of resistance to the baleful Yin Qi. The difference between the liquefied baleful Yin Qi and the baleful Yin Qi appeared. Not only would it invade the spiritual world and erode the Sword Intent and Profound, it would also cause a certain degree of damage to the body. Fortunately, Chu Mu could multitask. He controlled the circulation of sword origin to protect his body. At the same time, he began to form the 8th hand seal with both hands. He activated his mental cultivation method and merged his spiritual will with the baleful Yin Qi to refine the 7th Revolution Sword Intent. There was no doubt that the baleful Yin Qi was much stronger than the baleful Yin Qi. The refining effect was much better. Therefore, refining here, coupled with the fact that his spiritual will was stronger, the efficiency increased by almost 7 times. Ever since Chu Mu entered the Thousand Evil Valley, he had not appeared again. However, Qin Shanhe and the other 2 knew that Chu Mu was cultivating in the Thousand Evil Valley. However, they thought that Chu Mu was refining his 2nd Profound. They did not know that Chu Mu was still refining his Sword Intent and Profound of Gold. The 7th Revolution was already shocking enough. If they knew that Chu Mu was trying to reach the 8th Revolution, they would probably be scared silly. As time passed, the discussion about Chu Mu and Golden Yanlei gradually died down. As Golden Yanlei and Chu Mu did not appear, the discussion gradually died down. However, everyone remembered that day and waited for it to come. After Qin Shanhe and the other 2 used up all their battle points, they left the Thousand Evil Valley. After more than 100 days of continuous refining, Qin Shanhe's Sword Intent and Profound of Earth finally broke through to the 6th Revolution. Tu Gang's Speed Profound had also broken through from the 3rd Revolution to the peak of the 4th Revolution and was close to the 5th Revolution. Tantai Liuguang's Thunder Profound had increased from the 2nd Revolution to the 4th Revolution after using up all his battle points. This speed was considered fast, but compared to Chu Mu, there was still a huge gap. After using up all their battle points, they did not leave the Sword Palace. Instead, they started to cultivate the Burning Blood transformation. They naturally had their own secret arts, but they were not as good as the Burning Blood transformation. At the same time, Tu Gang and Tantai Liuguang sent messages back to the Hongtian sect and Tantai clan to ask for the Blood Yang elixir. Their status in the Hongtian sect and Tantai clan was extraordinary. Their reasonable requests would usually be fulfilled. In the Demon Slayer battle team's encampment, there was a cracking sound from a house. Two terrifying radiances were shot out and left ripples in the air. Chu Mu, you didn't expect this, right? After dispelling the 7th revolution sword intent and gold profound that you left in my heart, my cultivation actually broke through and reached the initial stage of the God-congealing realm. My strength has increased exponentially. When the time comes, I will properly repay your kindness. Jin Yanlei grinned. His face was filled with a sinister smile, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. A blessing in disguise. Originally, when Chu Mu left the 7th revolution sword intent and the 7th revolution gold profound in his heart was constantly under attack and was in unbearable pain. He did not expect that after dispelling it, he would unexpectedly break through. The difference between the peak of the entry stage and the initial stage was just a thin line, but his strength had increased exponentially. If he was at the initial stage of the God-congealing realm, he would be able to defeat Chu Mu even if he didn't execute his secret art. Once he executed his secret art, killing Chu Mu would be a piece of cake. I will let you live a little longer and enjoy your remaining life. Jin Yanlei sneered. His laughter echoed in his house. 8th revolution sword intent, such sharpness. In the depths of the Thousand Evil Valley, a soft sigh could be heard. In Chu Mu's spiritual world, at the edge of the sword intent in the fledgling sword soul, a layer of sharpness became increasingly clear. It was extremely terrifying. It made Chu Mu feel that the fledgling sword soul was showing signs of not being able to withstand the 8th revolution sword intent and was about to collapse. The 8th revolution sword intent was much stronger than the 7th revolution sword intent. A sword strengthened by the 8th revolution sword intent would be even sharper. 8th revolution sword intent, my soul is starting to feel stuff. Is the 8th revolution my limit? Chu Mu could not help but think to himself. Previously, he did not know where his limit was. It could be the 8th revolution or the 9th revolution, but he always had hope in his heart that he could refine it to the 9th revolution. But now, he had glimpsed a trace of his limit. The 8th revolution was not fated to reach the 9th revolution. He could not help but feel a trace of disappointment. But in an instant, that trace of disappointment was erased by Chu Mu. The 8th revolution was the 8th revolution. This had already surpassed many people, reaching a level that others could only look up to. Moreover, Instructor Ji Tianxiang had said that in the immemorial world, according to what he knew, there had never been a heaven-defying person who could refine the profound of sword intent to the 9th revolution. Perhaps Ji Tianxiang's understanding was not comprehensive enough, but it also showed how difficult it was to reach the 9th revolution. There were differences between the 8th revolution. It could be the early stage of the 8th revolution, the middle or late stage of the 8th revolution, or even the peak or the limit of the 8th revolution. There was also a difference between each small level. Chu Mu was sure that his limit was the 8th revolution, but he could not be sure which small level it was. Since he was sure that it was the 8th revolution, Chu Mu did not dwell on it. Instead, he began to refine the profound of metal. The profound of metal had already reached the peak of the early stage of the 7th revolution after being corroded by the cold streams for several months. It was only a fine line away from the middle stage. In just a day's time, Chu Mu had successfully refined the profound of metal to the middle stage of the 7th revolution and was moving towards the late stage. His battle points were very abundant, enough to last him an entire year. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, almost 9 months had passed since Chu Mu returned to the elite disciple area of the Sky Edge Sword Palace. Chapter 729. His sword intent had just entered the 8th revolution, and his metal profound had also just entered the 8th revolution. Unless Chu Mu created the 9th imprint of the 9 revolution heavenly shocking heart imprint, he wouldn't be able to continue using the imprint's power to refine it. However, he could borrow the demonic cold stream to continue refining it to the limit. Now, I can continue deeper. Chu Mu wore a faint smile as he took a step forward and walked deeper into Thousand Evil Valley. The powerful sword intent and metal Upanishad could resist the erosion of the cold current to the greatest extent. The deeper he went, the thicker the cold current would be, and the more powerful it would be. Extending his hand, a fingernail-sized Fiend crystal was caught by Chu Mu. The deeper he went, the higher the chances of encountering cold crystals. Chu Mu planned to obtain more cold crystals. Even if he entered the Crimson Wasteland, he could still temper his sword intent and profound to his heart's content. Moreover, cold crystals would be of great help to the other members of the Zhen Tian battle team. Going deeper and deeper, Chu Mu released his powerful mental consciousness. Although it was suppressed, he could still feel it within a radius of dozens of meters. The moment he felt the Fiend crystal appear, Chu Mu would quickly move and grab it. However, it was extremely difficult to move in such a dense cold flow of energy. His body was clearly restricted. Even if he used the 8th rank metal profound into his body, he was unable to move as fast as when he was in the outside world. Thus, Chu Mu missed a few energy crystals. However, he did not regret it. The deeper he went, the more cold crystals there would be. They would also be bigger and purer. After going deeper, he finally reached his limit and could not continue. Otherwise, Chu Mu was sure that the cold currents would cause great harm to his body. With the protection of the sword intent and the circulation of the sword origin, the impact of the cold current was completely blocked. The cold currents here were shockingly dense. Although they had not yet condensed into a solid state, they were already very viscous. They were much denser than mercury. Under the impact, the power was shocking. Chu Mu could feel that in this place, his every action was greatly restricted. He had to expend even more energy than usual. The good thing was that there were more baleful crystals here, and they would be able to find a piece in a short while. The sword was an extension of one's arm. When a swordsman practiced the sword, he had to reach a level where he could wield the sword as if it were his arm, and then continue to deepen and surpass it. Chu Mu's practice of the sword had long surpassed the level where he could wield the sword as if it was an extension of his body. He remembered that his teacher had once told him that the highest realm for a swordsman to practice the sword was to integrate the sword into the person's body, marrow, and soul, forming the imprint of the sword. It was as if the sword and the person were formed in the womb at the same time. They were born together and grew together. Their blood was connected and could not be separated. However, this was only a legend in the world of swordsmen, and no one had ever achieved it. Chu Mu drew his sword and began practicing his swordsmanship with the help of the endless restraints of the cold currents. It was quite difficult to make every stroke reach the most accurate trajectory in such an environment. Moreover, Chu Mu also had to pay attention to the appearance of baleful crystals while practicing his swordsmanship. Once a baleful crystal appeared, he would stab or cut it with his sword and pull it into his spatial ring. With enough battle points, Chu Mu was not in a hurry to leave the myriad evil valley. Once he used up most of his energy, he would retreat and let his energy recover before continuing deeper. After repeating this over and over again, Chu Mu's understanding of swordsmanship increased slightly. His domain of swordsmanship broke through again, reaching the 6th level. He also gained quite a few baleful crystals. At the same time, his sword intent and the profound of metal were constantly being eroded by the cold currents. They were constantly being tempered and improved bit by bit. However, the 8th rank was already very, very high. Every bit of improvement was very difficult. A few days later, Chu Mu left the myriad evil valley. It was night time, and he went to the observatory. His mental intent once again filled his mental world. It was time to refine and condense the consciousness star again. The fifth consciousness star. He condensed his mental intent and extended it to a height of 4,000 meters. He could feel the power of the stars more clearly. Southern Dipper Mind Refining Scripture, 5th chapter, Dubhe Star. The power of the stars of the Dubhe Star was guided and began to refine Chu Mu's mental intent. 10 days later, his mental intent was refined to the limit by the power of the stars. It was time to refine and condense the consciousness star again. Chu Mu was already very proficient in condensing the consciousness star. He condensed and compressed it again and again. Under his tyrannical willpower, the consciousness star finally took shape. The fifth consciousness star hung in the sky above his mental world, flickering with light. Chu Mu felt that his mental world had become stable again, and his 5 senses had improved again. There's still the last chapter. Looking up at the starry sky, Chu Mu sighed faintly. Unknowingly, it had been more than 2 years since he became an elite disciple. Time was really. He put away his emotions and left the observatory. The next time he came here might be half a year later. Shao Qin returned to the Sword Tower to rest for a day and organize his gains. 8th Revolution Sword Intent, 8th Revolution Metal Profound Meaning, 6th Level Sword Technique Domain, and a total of 133 baleful Een crystals. The smallest one was the size of a fingernail, which was several times larger than the soybean-sized ones he obtained earlier. The largest one was the size of a pigeon's egg. The baleful Een energy contained within was even purer and denser. More than 100 baleful Een crystals could be considered a bountiful harvest. However, Chu Mu was still not satisfied. He wanted more. After resting for a night, Chu Mu headed to the 10,000 Evil Valley again. He still had a lot of battle points, enough for him to stay in the 10,000 Evil Valley for a few months. Shao Chen continued to go deeper and reached his limit again. He drew his sword and practiced his sword technique. At the same time, he collected more baleful Een crystals. When he was tired, he rested. When he exhausted his energy, he recovered. Doing this over and over again was undoubtedly very boring. However, Chu Mu did not mind. He was completely immersed in it. His sword techniques improved bit by bit. His sword technique domain increased from the initial 6th level to the initial 6th level. Chu Mu was cultivating. Qin Shanhe, Tu Gang, and Tantai Liuguang were also cultivating. Jin Yanlei was also cultivating in seclusion. The breakthrough in his cultivation had increased his spiritual sense by a lot. He had to adapt to this increase and use it skillfully to unleash its full power. The time of his battle with Chu Mu was getting closer. Jin Yanlei was confident that he would win. In the blink of an eye, 1 month passed. There were still 2 months before the battle of life and death between Chu Mu and Jin Yanlei. In the extremely dense baleful Een current, a golden light flashed. The sword pierced out. In an instant, the baleful Een current in the surroundings was pulled. It twisted and turned into a whirlpool, sweeping to the side. As the sword light danced, the baleful Een current was also twisted. Within the sword light, a clear area appeared. Chu Mu's figure was practicing his sword. Shao Chun was at the peak of the 6th level of the sword technique domain. He was only a very thin layer away from the 7th level. However, it was not easy to break through this layer. The obscure feeling made Chu Mu stop practicing his sword. He knew that this was his limit. Unless he could go deeper and make the binding power of the baleful Een current even stronger, he would not be able to improve his sword technique further and reach the 7th level of the sword technique domain. Letting out a breath, Chu Mu sheathed his sword. The baleful Een current in the surroundings rushed over again. Chu Mu quickly retreated. He had decided to leave the 1000 Evil Valley. After a month of erosion and tempering, his sword intent and gold profound had become a little purer. However, he still had not reached the early stage. He was at the peak of the 6th level of the sword technique domain. He was only 1 step away from the 7th level. His biggest gain was the baleful Een crystals. Every day, Chu Mu could get at least 100 baleful Een crystals. The smallest ones were the size of a fingernail, while the largest were the size of a pigeon's egg. After a month, the number of baleful Een crystals in his interspatial ring kept increasing. Now, he had 3,875 crystals. After returning to the sword tower, Chu Mu started to organize them. He divided the 3,875 Een Fiend crystals according to their size, which could basically be divided into 3 levels. The smallest was the fingernail-sized Een Fiend crystal. Chu Mu defined it as a first-level Een Fiend crystal. As for the pigeon egg-sized Een Fiend crystal, he defined it as a third level. Between first and third level Een Fiend crystals, he defined it as a second level. After classifying them, Grade 1 baleful Een crystals were the most abundant, with 2,150, Grade 2 baleful Een crystals were second, with 1,035, and Grade 3 baleful Een crystals were the least, with 690. If he continued to stay in the Thousand Evil Valley, he could get more baleful Een crystals. However, Chu Mu was not willing to do that. He had other things to do. Picking up a Grade 1 baleful Een crystal, Shao Chen absorbed the baleful Een energy into his spiritual world. Soon, the baleful Een crystal disappeared. This was a crystal formed by the baleful Een current. There were no impurities in it. Once it was absorbed, it would disappear. The incomparably pure baleful Een energy in his spiritual world split into 2, wrapping around the sword intent and the gold profound, constantly eroding them. The sword intent and gold profound also constantly fought against the baleful Een energy, tempering them. According to the current consumption rate, Chu Mu calculated silently. A Grade 1 baleful Een crystal could support him for 2 days of tempering. If his sword intent and gold profound were only at the 7th revolution, a Grade 1 baleful Een crystal would be enough for him to temper for 4 days. Grade 1 is 2 days. Grade 2 should be 4 days. Grade 3 might be 6 or even 8 days. Chu Mu thought to himself. However, this was only his guess. Whether it was true or not had yet to be verified. Taking out the battle record sword token, Shao Chun informed Qin Shan, He Gang, and Tantai Liuguang to gather in the sword tower. Chu Mu explained the effects of the baleful Een crystals. Then, he took out 300 Grade 1 baleful Een crystals and distributed them equally to the 3 of them. At their level, 1 Grade 1 baleful Een crystal was enough for a few days. 100 of them could last them for a few hundred days. Tu Gang and Tantai Liuguang also took out 2 dark red elixir gourd. Captain, these are the Blood Yang elixirs. Tu Gang smiled. The Blood Yang elixirs were sent over by the Hongtian sect and the Tantai clan. However, there weren't many of them. After all, the Blood Yang elixirs were expensive to refine. Furthermore, there were only 400 of them. Chu Mu received 200, Qin Shanhe received 40, and Tu Gang and Tantai Liuguang each received 80. Chapter 730. Captain, the Stardust Battle Team successfully advanced to a second-rate battle team 10 days ago, Qin Shanhe said. Sikong Zhan's actions are very fast. Chu Mu smiled and said, Let's go. We should set off now. Once we have enough battle points, we can apply for the promotion of the battle team. In the Thousand Evil Valley, Chu Mu had obtained a large amount of vile crystals. With the current situation, he did not need to enter the Thousand Evil Valley to use the vile crystals to refine his sword will and ultimacy. Qin Shanhe, Tu Gang, and Tantai Liuguang followed the method Chu Mu taught them. They took out a level 1 vile crystal and absorbed the energy into their spiritual world, allowing the pure vile force to corrode and refine their ultimacy. Qin Shanhe's sword will and earth ultimacy had just reached the 6th revolution. Hence, both of them were refined by the vile force. Tu Gang and Tantai Liuguang's sword will had reached the limit of the 6th revolution and had no effect. However, the vile force did not have intelligence. Hence, the vile force was divided into 3 parts. 1 part corroded the sword will, 1 part corroded the profound at the limit of the 6th revolution, and 1 part corroded the new ultimacy. In this way, a large amount of vile force was wasted. In response to this situation, Chu Mu thought for a while and came up with a method. He used part of his spiritual force to form a binding to control all the vile force and make it surround the ultimacy that he wanted to refine. As true geniuses, Tu Gang and Tantai Liuguang's souls were better than the average swordsman's. Their spiritual force was naturally stronger, and they also cultivated extraordinary spiritual technique. After half a day, Tu Gang and Tantai Liuguang had mastered the method that Chu Mu had taught them. However, because they were in a hurry, there were some flaws. They had to perform it again every 3 days. Qin Shanhao was also learning it because there were times when he could use it. Tu Gang and Tantai Liuguang sensed it carefully and made an estimate. The power of a level 1 vile crystal could refine their 4th revolution ultimacy for more than 2 months. The effect was shocking. As for Qin Shanhao, he could refine his 6th revolution sword will and earth ultimacy at the same time. A level 1 vile crystal could support him for 8 days. This meant that even if they fought on the blood wastelands, they could constantly refine their sword intent and mysteries, making them much more efficient than other swordsmen. However, there were disadvantages as well. The sword intent and profundities that were under refinement were unable to release their full might. To put it simply, Qin Shanha's sword essence and earth ultimacy were both tempered by the baleful Yin energy and could only unleash the power of the 5th revolution. As for Chu Mu's sword essence and metal ultimacy, they could only unleash the power of the 7th revolution. As for Tu Gang and Tantai Liuguang, they were not affected. They did not need to use new profound meanings to fight. When the 4 members of Zhen Tian's battle team appeared in Sky Peak Valley, everyone was immediately shocked. Am I seeing things? That's Chu Mu, right? That's right, it's Chu Mu. He actually wants to enter the Crimson Wasteland? Is the time of his life and death battle with Golden Flame Lei coming soon? Instead of enjoying his last moments, he actually wants to enter the Crimson Wasteland. He's probably going to deliver himself to the other races. If he dies in the Crimson Wasteland, he can still gain a good reputation. It's better than dying under Golden Flame Lei's sword and being seen as someone who doesn't know his own strength and is seeking his own death. There were all sorts of mockery. Almost no one felt that Chu Mu could contend against Golden Flame Lei, let alone defeat him. In the eyes of others, it might just be something to talk about, something to have fun after a meal. Chu Mu and the others ignored them. Arguing was the most useless rebuttal. When the time came, reality would tell them how wrong they were and how ignorant and stupid their thoughts were. Entering the Crimson Wasteland once again, everyone's strength had more or less increased. This was especially true for Chu Mu. Although he could only use the 7th revolution sword essence and metal ultimacy, he was still stronger than before. Even if he encountered an opponent on the level of Golden Flame Lei, with his current strength, he could contend against him without using the Burning Blood transformation. If he used the Burning Blood transformation, he would definitely be able to defeat his opponent. It could be said that in the Crimson Wasteland, there were not many strong enemies that could threaten Chu Mu. The possibility of encountering one was extremely small. They hunted frantically. During the day, they hunted immemorial ferocious beasts and other races. During the night, they hunted blood demons. Everyone's rest time was very short. The battle points on the battle achievement soared crazily. News of Zhen Tian's battle team entering the Crimson Wasteland to hunt spread. Immediately, many powerful races moved out. Their target was Zhen Tian's battle team. Killing the Zhen Tian battle team, not only would they be able to obtain the corresponding battle points, they would also be able to obtain their wealth, which would definitely be very rich. Most importantly, after killing the Zhen Tian battle team, their reputation would soar and their reputation would be illustrious. Those who could be indifferent to fame and fortune were usually those who had experienced countless trials and tribulations. Even Chu Mu, who was indifferent to fame and fortune, did not dare to say that he was indifferent to fame and fortune. However, when they encountered Zhen Tian's battle team, they were just sending themselves to their deaths. Chu Mu's strength had exceeded their expectations, and the battle team badge that Chu Mu had created had a defensive seal and a counterattack seal that could block a 6th-class swordsman's all-out attack. This allowed Qin Shanhe and the others to save themselves and kill their opponents when they were in danger. After the seal was used, it could automatically replenish itself. It only needed some time. 1 month. Zhen Tian's battle team hunted crazily in the Crimson Wasteland for a whole month. Everyone had a bountiful harvest. Bawang's strength had risen to the limit of the 6th-class swordsman. Zhen Tian's battle team returned once again. The moment they entered Sky Peak Valley, they caused another commotion and discussion. Chu Mu, you still have 1 month's time. Enjoy your last moments. A member of the Demon Slayer battle team sneered at Chu Mu. You should pass this message to Golden Flame Lei. Chu Mu glanced at the other party and smiled faintly. Elder, I would like to apply for the battle team's advancement test. In the Stop War building, Chu Mu said to the hunchbacked elder. At the same time, he reported the name of his battle team. Zhen Tian's battle team, a third-rate battle team. To apply for the second-rate battle team assessment, you need to pay 5,000 contribution points. The hunchbacked elder said unhurriedly. Chu Mu took out the battle record sword token and passed it to the hunchbacked elder. The advancement of a battle team required a lot of battle points. To become an official battle team required 1,000 battle points. To become a second-rate battle team, a third-rate battle team required 5,000 battle points. To become a first-rate battle team, a second-rate battle team required 30,000 battle points. The members of a battle team needed to spend battle points to train. Basically, everyone needed them. It was very difficult for a third-rate battle team to accumulate 5,000 battle points without affecting their normal training. For example, the Zhen Tian's battle team, which had just become a third-rate battle team, had applied to become a second-rate battle team and had taken out 5,000 battle points. It was very shocking. However, the hunchbacked elder was only in charge of filing and did not care about anything else. After a month of crazy hunting in the Crimson Wasteland, Chu Mu alone had obtained 7,000 battle points. Tantai Liuguang, Tu Gang and Qin Shanhe had also obtained 7,000 battle points. Each of them took out a portion of their battle points and gave them to Chu Mu to be used for the battle team's advancement. The 5,000 battle points on the battle record sword token were deducted. However, there were still a few thousand points left. The hunchbacked elder took out a book and opened it. For a third-rate battle team to become a second-rate battle team, 5,000 battle points is only the qualification. You must pass the test to be able to advance. The hunchbacked elder said unhurriedly, choose 10 third-rate battle teams and defeat them. Or choose a second-rate battle team to defeat. Then, the Zhen Tian's battle team will be able to advance. Choose a second-rate battle team. Chu Mu said immediately without hesitation. Although the Zhen Tian's battle team only had 4 members, each of them was very strong. Even if they were placed in the 3 super battle teams, they would be core team leaders. A second-rate battle team was nothing. The hunchbacked elder flipped the book to the page where the second-rate battle teams were recorded. He placed it in front of Chu Mu and let Chu Mu choose. There were dozens of second-rate battle teams. If he chose to defeat one of them, it would prove that the Zhen Tian's battle team had the strength of a second-rate battle team and had the qualifications to become a second-rate battle team. In Chu Mu's eyes, second-rate battle teams were all the same. He randomly chose one. Qinghe Battle Team. The location of the challenge is the small battlefield. When the time comes, the Zhen Tian's battle team and the Qinghe battle team will both send out a small team. The challenge will take place 3 days later. Prepare well. The hunchbacked elder kept the book and said, Thank you, Elder. Chu Mu saluted with his sword, and left the war stop tower with the rest. Head Captain, something big has happened. A voice rang out from the Qinghe battle team's head captain's sword tower. What big thing? Head Captain Lin Qinghe frowned slightly and asked with dissatisfaction. A battle team is challenging our Qinghe battle team. The member immediately said with a strange expression, It's the third-rate battle team, the Zhen Tian's battle team. They want to be promoted to a second-rate battle team. What big thing is this? Lin Qinghe's tone was a little dissatisfied. Although it had been a few years since a third-rate battle team's promotion test, it had happened more than a month ago. Now that it had appeared again, he was just a little surprised. Suddenly, Lin Qinghe's eyes widened. He stood up in shock. The Zhen Tian's battle team? You mean the battle team created by Chu Mu? That's right, Head Captain. The member immediately replied. Lin Qinghe sat down again. His expression kept changing. Then, he sank into deep thought. Not long after, he sneered. If I remember correctly, this Chu Mu will have a life-and-death battle with the Demon Slayer battle team's elder, Jin Yanlei, in about a month's time. It seems that in this month they have earned a lot of battle points in the Crimson Wasteland. Their goal is to promote their battle team to a second-rate battle team. I really don't know if he's brainless or if he doesn't care about the life-and-death battle with Jin Yanlei. He actually has the time to do other things. Lin Qinghe mocked and ridiculed. Then, he said to the member, let the first elite team prepare for the battle. Teach the Zhen Tian's battle team a good lesson. Let them understand how high the sky is. Yes, Head Captain. The member immediately left to convey the head captain's message. Chapter 731. The 3 days would give the two battle teams some time to prepare. At the same time, the news would spread so that more people would know about it. When the time came, there would be many people coming to watch. Zhen Tian Battle Team applies for the second-rate battle team assessment. Challenge Qinghe Battle Team. Similar news immediately caused a huge commotion. All kinds of discussions appeared again. I think Chu Mu went crazy under the pressure of Jin Yanlei. That's right. If he didn't go crazy, why would he do such a thing? He should use those battle points to cultivate properly and try his best to increase his strength. 5,000 battle points. How long can he cultivate for? How many cultivation resources can he obtain? He's really an idiot. When Jin Yanlei heard of this, he was furious because he felt that Chu Mu's actions were clearly not putting him in his eyes. He simply didn't care about the impending life-and-death battle with him. Chu Mu! Chu Mu! Jin Yanlei's face was gloomy. He clenched his fists, his nails almost piercing into his flesh. His eyes were filled with killing intent. There's less than a month's time. When the time comes, I'll make you die a horrible death. 3 days passed in a flash. During these few days, Chu Mu and the others stayed in their respective sword towers to cultivate sword origin, sword skills, strength control, etc. As for the refinement of sword intent and ultimacy, they could leave it to the gloomy crystals. On the first floor of the sword tower, Chu Mu was practicing his sword. As soon as he swung his sword, a buzzing sound could be heard in the air. Then, the air within 7 meters was distorted to a degree visible to the naked eye. Sword skill domain, I've finally reached the 7th level. Chu Mu revealed a smile. Previously, he didn't improve for a long time. In fact, that was because he was accumulating. It was only when he started to make a breakthrough in the Evil Valley that he reached the peak of the 6th level. Now, after a month of killing in the Crimson Wasteland and 3 days of cultivation, his sword skill had improved again. There were a total of 10 levels in the sword technique domain. Chu Mu was not interested in the sword technique domain, but the realm after the sword technique domain. At his age and level, it was extremely rare for someone to be able to reach the 7th level of the sword technique domain. Looking at Golden Flame Thunder, his talent was considered average among swordsmen, but he had only reached the 5th level of the sword technique domain. He had yet to reach the peak. Even some of the Sword of Gojoseon experts had not reached the 7th level of the sword technique domain. Perhaps it was not particularly powerful, but it represented a swordsman's understanding and mastery of swordsmanship. Time's up. Sheathing his sword back into its scabbard, Chu Mu's face flashed with a smile as he walked out of the sword tower. After meeting up with the other 3, they headed straight to the small battlefield. This was the first time Chu Mu had come to the small battlefield. The small battlefield was the area for the elite disciples of the Sky Edge Sword Palace. It was a specially developed area. The area was very wide and there were many different terrains, such as valleys, forests, rivers, swamps, deserts, and so on. The small battlefield was a place for the battle teams to battle. The battle teams could freely choose the terrains. After all, in the immemorial world, there were all kinds of terrains. Once swordsmen left the Sky Edge Sword Palace to explore the outside world, they might be trapped in all kinds of terrains. Some terrains were more ordinary and did not have much of an impact. However, some terrains would affect the normal performance of one's strength. If one was unable to adapt to the terrains, it would undoubtedly be very bad. The small battlefield could be considered as a way for swordsmen to adapt in advance. At the same time, it could also strengthen the swordsman's adaptability and the temporary cooperation of the team, cultivating various kinds of tacit understanding. There were also seats around the small battlefield for the spectators to sit. Furthermore, the arrangement was very good. There were chairs and tables. One could drink a few cups while watching. Gentian's battle team's advancement battle, Chu Mu's reputation, and so on had attracted a lot of attention. Therefore, there were many spectators at the small battlefield. The first elite team of the Qinghe battle team arrived at almost the same time as Zhen Tian's battle team. Both parties met at the entrance of the small battlefield. Chu Mu, your Zhen Tian's battle team shouldn't only have 4 people, right? The leader of the first elite team of the Qinghe battle team was startled at first. Then, he sneered with a look of mockery. 4 people is enough. Chu Mu smiled faintly and said, ignoring the other party's mockery. The elite team of a second-rate battle team was only at the 3rd transition swordsman level. At most, they were at the 4th transition swordsman level. In their eyes, they were like ants. How could the mockery of ants make humans angry? Unless it was those who lacked self-cultivation. Enough. Heh. After this, you will know how high the sky is. The leader of the elite team of the Qinghe battle team sneered. The other members also showed a look of disdain. Walking into the small battlefield, the Qinghe battle team was the party being challenged. They had the right to choose the terrain. This kind of challenge was a little disadvantageous for the battle team that initiated the challenge. After all, there were many terrains. The opponent would definitely choose a terrain that was suitable for them to display their strength. If they were not familiar with the terrain, their strength would be greatly reduced. In the end, the elite team of the Qinghe battle team chose the terrain that was most advantageous to them. It was a mixture of trees and rocks. Be prepared to be defeated. The leader of the elite team of the Qinghe battle team laughed and walked into the chosen terrain. Chu Mu and the other 3 didn't say anything and also walked into the terrain. In the spectator seats, the other members of the Qinghe battle team were basically all present. They were sitting together. The head captain Lin Qinghe and the 2 vice-head captains were sitting around a table. On the table, there were wine, fruits, barbecued meat, etc. At the chosen terrain, there was a high platform on the north and south side. On the high platforms, there was a flag fluttering. The flag of the Qinghe battle team was red, while the flag of the Zhen Tian battle team was blue. The battle between the 2 battle teams wasn't about which battle team defeated the other. It was about the flag. The battle team that could snatch the opponent's flag and bring it back to the high platform would be the winner. There were no restrictions on how one could obtain the flag. In other words, one could do anything within the small battlefield. As such, it wasn't just about the strength of the battle team that was being tested. It was also about the battle tactics between the battle teams, the cooperation between the members, and the utilization of the terrain. In short, compared to pure strength, such a battle was more about strength and wisdom. Sometimes, the stronger side would lose. This was because, other than strength, they were inferior to the opponent in all other aspects. Of course, if the difference in strength was too obvious, it would be useless no matter how much wisdom one had. The two battle teams came to their respective high platforms and looked at each other from a distance of tens of thousands of meters. This was the first time that the Zhen Tian battle team was participating in a team battle. However, it wasn't the first time for the elite team of the Qinghe battle team. They were more experienced. The leader of the elite team of the Qinghe battle team started giving out orders. Even though he showed a lot of disdain towards the Zhen Tian battle team, they wouldn't underestimate the other party when the battle started. After every order was given, the members started to move. They divided up the work and cooperated in an orderly manner. They displayed good quality and rich experience. Many of the spectators nodded their heads. For the elite team of a second-rate battle team to be able to do this, it was considered pretty good. 3 of them stayed on the high platform to prevent the flag from being taken away. 7 of them spread out and entered the forest. Their figures disappeared and they quickly surrounded the Zhen Tian battle team. "Leader, what about us?" Qin Shanhe asked. Chu Mu had been observing the actions of the other party. He suddenly realized that he was lacking. There was no doubt that his strength was very strong. He could defeat the other party by himself. However, in terms of the deployment of his team members, there wasn't much that stood out. "Looks like I need to recruit a talent who is good at commanding." Chu Mu thought to himself. A lack was a lack. It was innate and difficult to change. It would take a lot of time. Chu Mu didn't plan to change this because he wanted to use his time to increase his strength. However, it was necessary to recruit a talent who was good at commanding and had the ability to be a strategist. That would increase the overall effectiveness of the battle team by a lot or even a few times. Fortunately, the opponent in front of him was nothing to worry about. There was no need for any arrangements. "Which one of you will go and take the other party's flag?" Chu Mu asked indifferently. "I'll go." 3 voices sounded at the same time. "Then you guys can compete. Leave this to me." Chu Mu smiled. "Forget it. Whoever wants to go can go." 2 gang mumbled. "I give up," Qin Shanhe said. With their strength, there was no need for any strategy. They just had to rush over in a straight line and take the other party's flag. In such a situation, speed was a huge advantage. In terms of speed, Chu Mu wasn't counted. Who could compare with Tantai Liuguang? "What's going on with the Zhen Tian battle team? I'm afraid it's their first time participating in such a battle and they don't know what to do. How pitiful. If they chose to challenge a third-rate battle team, they could use this opportunity to familiarize themselves with this battle style. Unfortunately, they are too ambitious. They directly challenged a second-rate battle team. Defeat is inevitable. If they weren't ambitious, Chu Mu wouldn't have dared to challenge the Golden Flame Bomb." Tantai Liuguang's face was indifferent. With a sway of his body, he moved and entered the forest like an aurora. His speed made people's eyes light up and their hearts jump. Not long after, Tantai Liuguang crossed a distance of tens of thousands of meters and rushed directly to the other party's high platform. Before the 3 swordsmen who were guarding the high platform could react, Tantai Liuguang's sword had cut the other party's flag. Grabbing it in his hand, he turned his body, drew an arc, and entered the forest again. Fast, extremely fast. It was so fast that many people didn't have time to react before the flag was taken away. "Chase after him!" The head captain of the Qinghe battle team roared. The veins on his forehead were bulging. Unfortunately, Tantai Liuguang's speed made them despair. Before the members they sent out could reach the other party's high platform, Tantai Liuguang had already returned. The flag was handed over to Chu Mu. Chu Mu took the flag and raised it high. The surroundings were completely silent. Everyone was dumbfounded. Many wine cups fell to the ground and rolled around. No one paid attention to the mockery in that voice. Chapter 732. The broken flag was held in Chu Mu's hand. It fluttered in the wind, and the red and blue colors reflected each other. The members of the Qinghe battle team were all dumbfounded. Their brains seemed to have short-circuited and their thoughts stopped. They had lost, and lost so thoroughly. They couldn't find any excuse or reason to defend themselves. It wasn't because they were too weak, but because their opponents were too strong. There were no battle tactics or strategies. Only one of the four people was sent out at a terrifying speed, and before they could react, the flag was taken away, leaving them with only a back view. Even if the head captain and deputy head captain of the Qinghe battle team took action, they wouldn't be able to contend against it. The performance of the Zhen Tian battle team this time had blinded the eyes of the other swordsmen. Especially those who wanted to see the Zhen Tian battle team make a fool of themselves. Each and every one of them felt as though they had been slapped repeatedly, very loudly. Tantai Liuguang had truly walked into the eyes of those experts. They were all secretly guessing how strong he was. Sixth revolution. After guessing, many people were shocked. They were also envious of the Zhen Tian battle team's good luck. They were actually able to recruit a sixth revolution expert. It was inevitable that the Zhen Tian battle team would become a second-rate battle team. After returning that day, the four members of the Zhen Tian battle team drank and celebrated in Chu Mu's sword gauntlet. It was as though they were giving themselves a holiday. Many people were guessing, what shocking action would this seemingly crazy Chu Mu do next? For a few days, those who were paying attention to Chu Mu realized that Chu Mu had been staying in his sword gauntlet and didn't come out. Chu Mu didn't plan to leave the Sky Edge Sword Palace. There was less than a month's time before the life and death battle with Golden Yanlei. During this period of time, Chu Mu had to adjust himself well. During the life and death battle, he had to be in his peak condition to deal with all kinds of dangers that might arise. Chu Mu wouldn't underestimate Golden Flame Lei's strength, but he wouldn't pay too much attention to it either. He was thinking further ahead. Perhaps the life and death battle with Golden Flame Lei wasn't as simple as it seemed. Chu Mu didn't do anything. The other members of the Zhen Tian battle team also didn't do anything. They continued to cultivate as per normal. Chu Mu would also allocate some time every day to study the 9th seal of the 9 Revolution Heavenly Shocking Seal. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. There was still half a month before the life and death battle between Chu Mu and Jin Yanlei. For half a month, the Demon Slayer squad hadn't made any big move. However, today, a shocking piece of news suddenly spread. The Demon Slayer battle team was the banker. Everyone could place bets in the name of their battle team or as individuals. They could bet on who would win the battle between Chu Mu and Golden Flame Thunder. Golden Flame Thunder's cultivation had reached the minor spirit condensation realm. Moreover, he had been strengthening his cultivation. His strength increased step by step, becoming stronger and stronger. Therefore, the members of the Demon Slayer battle team had a 300% confidence in Golden Flame Thunder's victory. The ratio of the bet was 10 times. In other words, those who bet on Golden Flame Thunder's victory, if Golden Flame Thunder defeated Chu Mu in the end, they would not only get back their bets, but also receive a tenth of their bet. On the other hand, if those who bet on Chu Mu's victory and Chu Mu really won in the end, they would not only get back their bets, but also receive 10 times their bet. 10 times, that was enough to make people go crazy. If they wanted to earn more, they naturally had to bet on Chu Mu's victory. Unfortunately, there was a huge gap between Chu Mu and Golden Flame Thunder's cultivation. As for what Qin Shanhe had said before about Golden Flame Thunder escaping after Chu Mu and Chu Mu's battle, not many people believed it. After all, the gap between the Origin Realm and the Spirit Condensation Realm was publicly known. The experience of these swordsmen determined their horizons. Moreover, other than the difference in cultivation between Golden Flame Thunder and Chu Mu, there was also the difference in their backgrounds. Golden Flame Thunder was one of the 3 elders of the Demon Slayer battle team, and the Demon Slayer battle team was one of the 3 super battle teams with a deep foundation. This battle, whether it was Golden Flame Thunder's life or the Demon Slayer battle team's reputation, no matter what, the Demon Slayer battle team would not let Golden Flame Thunder lose. Therefore, they would treat Chu Mu as an enemy. They would give Golden Flame Thunder all kinds of preparations to deal with any possible changes and kill Chu Mu with their swords. No matter how they thought about it, Chu Mu did not have any chance of defeating Golden Flame Thunder. Therefore, those who started to place their bets all placed their bets on Golden Flame Thunder. Although the final profit was not much, it was still a free win. As for the Demon Slayer battle team, they might lose some money in the end. However, for them who were rich, this kind of loss was nothing. It would not hurt them at all. Instead, it would greatly increase their reputation, and they would be in the limelight, overshadowing the other 2 super battle teams. The bets only accepted crystals. The God Slayer battle team and the Monster Slayer battle team both took out a large amount of crystals to bet on Golden Flame Thunder's victory. If Golden Flame Thunder won, even if the 2 super battle teams only received a tenth of the profits, it was still not a small amount. At the betting area of the Demon Slayer battle team, a large number of swordsmen had gathered. They lined up and were all prepared to place their bet. 10,000 low-grade crystals on Golden Flame Thunder's victory. 100,000 low-grade crystals on Chu Mu's victory. One of the members of the Demon Slayer battle team was responsible for collecting the crystals while announcing the result. At the same time, he also let the people beside him record the result. What? Someone actually bet on Chu Mu's victory? 100,000 low-grade crystals? Is there something wrong with this person's head? The person who placed the bet immediately became the center of attention. Everyone's eyes fell on him. His expression did not change, but he could not help but feel nervous. It should be known that some of the people who were looking at him were not that powerful, while some were really powerful. The pressure they brought was huge. You are not wrong. Are you sure that 100,000 low-grade crystals on Chu Mu's victory? You should know that once he loses, 100,000 low-grade crystals will be gone. The person in charge of the registration looked at the person who placed the bet and asked for confirmation. I am sure. The person who placed the bet said. At the same time, he was cursing in his heart. The head captain is too optimistic about this Chu Mu. He is only at the origin realm. No matter how powerful he is, how could he kill a god condensation realm swordsman? It would be hard for him to even fight back. I really don't know what the head captain is thinking. It turned out that this person was from the Stardust battle team. It was Sikong Zhan's idea to bet on Chu Mu's victory. 100,000 low-grade crystals was not a small amount. It was a fortune that many Origin Realm swordsmen could not accumulate even after working hard for many years. In the eyes of others, betting on Chu Mu's victory was a very stupid thing to do. Even the person who placed the bet thought so. Unfortunately, it was Sikong Zhan's idea. The crystals also belonged to Sikong Zhan. He was only following Sikong Zhan's instructions. Looking at the person who placed the bet with a sneer, the people from the Demon Slayer battle team started recording. One by one, the people who placed the bet basically all bet on Golden Flame Thunder's victory. You don't accept battle points? A voice sounded, causing the surroundings to become silent. Don't you have eyes? So it's you, Qin Shanhe. The person in charge of the Demon Slayer battle team looked and immediately sneered. What? Does the Zhen Tian battle team want to bet on battle points? You only need to answer me. Do you dare to accept the battle points bet from the Zhen Tian battle team? Qin Shanhe said word by word. He suddenly took a step forward, and a majestic aura surged out. He shouted in a low voice, Do you dare? Answer me. The person in charge of the Demon Slayer battle team was only a normal member. His strength was much weaker than Qin Shanha's. Facing Qin Shanha's mountain-like aura, his face suddenly changed, and his hair stood on end. He was stunned for a moment. Why wouldn't we dare? As long as the Zhen Tian battle team dares to place a bet, the Demon Slayer battle team dares to accept it. It doesn't matter if it's crystals, battle points, or anything else. A cold voice sounded with extreme sharpness. Like a heavenly sword, it cut Qin Shanha's aura into pieces and dissipated into nothingness. Immediately, a figure flashed and approached. Good. The Zhen Tian battle team will bet 5,000 battle points on Chu Mu's victory, Qin Shanha said with a cold smile. He did not show any signs of weakness. He directly took out a temporary battle points sword token. There are 5,000 battle points on it. You can check it. After you confirm it, record it, and give me a reply. I believe that at that time, with the Demon Slayer battle team's foundation, they won't refuse to give you the 50,000 battle points. 50,000 battle points are nothing to the Demon Slayer battle team. The key is that, if you want to take it, you have to be alive. The expert from the Demon Slayer battle team had a cold face as he responded to Qin Shanha's sharp words. Let's wait and see. Qin Shanha smiled and said, Prepare to cry. The other party also sneered. It seemed that both parties were very confident. However, it was still unknown who would win in the end. The other party checked Qin Shanha's temporary battle points sword token. There were indeed 5,000 battle points. It could not be faked. After accepting it, he recorded it, and then gave Qin Shanha a reply. On the reply were the bets, the amount of the bet, who would win, and so on. It was very clear to avoid disputes caused by unclear information. After Qin Shanha received the reply, he put it into his spatial ring. He glanced at everyone and took in their expressions. Without saying a word, he turned and strode away. The members of the Zhen Tian battle team were certain that Chu Mu would win. This was because they had seen the battle between Chu Mu and Golden Yanlei with their own eyes. They had also seen Golden Yanlei escape in a sorry state in the end. In a year's time, perhaps Golden Yanlei had become stronger, but Chu Mu had definitely improved as well. The three of them did not know how strong Chu Mu had become. They only knew that they were no match for Chu Mu. Even if the three of them worked together, they were still no match for Chu Mu. Moreover, they were members of the Zhen Tian battle team. They were teammates on the same line as Chu Mu. No matter how they looked at it, they believed that Chu Mu would win. The 5,000 battle points was also an idea proposed by Chu Mu. If they won, they would be able to obtain 50,000 battle points. At that time, they would be able to apply for the assessment of a first-rate battle team. Everything was within Chu Mu's plan. Chapter 733. Chu Mu has always been holed up in his sword tower. We are unable to assess his true strength. Someone from the Demon Slayer battle team said. It's fine. Chu Mu's talent is indeed extraordinary, and his strength is extraordinary. He indeed has the strength to contend against an ordinary divine condensation realm swordsman. However, with the increase in Golden Flame Lei's cultivation and other preparations, it's enough to kill him. That's right. It's fine if such a genius doesn't work for us, but he still wants to be our enemy. We can't let him grow. After Chu Mu's death, what about the other members of the Zhen Tian battle team? They are all geniuses, but they are not as good as Chu Mu. Moreover, two of them have extraordinary backgrounds. If we can recruit them, we will. If we can't recruit them, we don't need to care. They can't use the power behind them to deal with us. If they do, the Sky-Edge Sword Palace will not sit idly by. I'm really looking forward to seeing the fall of a genius with my own eyes. The betting continued for many days before it gradually quieted down. Because those who wanted to bet had already placed their bets, there was no way to change them. Most of the people bet on Golden Flame Lei's victory. Only a few people bet on Chu Mu's victory. These few people were scattered. Among them, Sikong Zhan and Qin Shanha bet because they had confidence in Chu Mu, while the others bet because they wanted to try their luck. In any case, they would only lose a few thousand low-grade origin crystals. They would be able to earn it back in a short period of time. If they were lucky and won, they would have 10 times the profit. No matter how heated the discussions outside were, Chu Mu did not care. He wholeheartedly stayed in his sword tower to cultivate. With the baleful Een crystal, he allowed the baleful Een energy to freely refine his sword intent and gold profound, gradually approaching the early stage. After a short period of time, he would be able to reach the early stage of the 8th revolution. At that time, his power would increase. Finally, half a month had passed, and the day of the final battle had arrived. Because this matter caused a huge commotion and alarmed the higher-ups of the Sky Edge Sword Palace, the location of the final battle was changed from the Crimson Wasteland to a small battlefield within the Sword Palace. In this way, all the elite disciples of the Sword Palace would be able to watch, and it would also ensure that no outsiders would come out to cause trouble during the final battle. It had to be known that within the interior of the Crimson Wasteland, there were many powerful experts from other races. Once they heard the news, they would definitely organize and attack the human swordsmen. At that time, a huge chaotic battle would erupt, causing countless casualties. This was something the Sky Edge Sword Palace did not wish to see. The change of venue had been announced a few days ago. They didn't ask for the consent of Chu Mu and Jin Yanlei. However, Chu Mu and Jin Yanlei didn't object. If they fought in Sword Palace, they wouldn't be disturbed by the outsiders. Moreover, in the decisive battle in Sword Palace, under the eyes of tens of thousands of people, he would be able to kill Chu Mu under his sword. Thinking of this, Jin Yanlei felt extremely excited. Small battlefields were usually only opened for battles between battle teams. The opening this time was an exception. Almost all the members of the battle teams had returned. They did not want to miss this decisive battle. Perhaps it would be very interesting to watch. The small battlefield was very lively. There were many swordsmen sitting in the spectator stands. They came from different battle teams, and they seemed to be in groups. The tables were filled with wine, various kinds of meat, fruits, vegetables, and so on. It looked very rich. The 3 great battle teams occupied the best seats, and they were also the largest because they had the most members. Next were the 11 first-rate battle teams, then the second-rate battle teams, and then the third-rate battle teams. As for the unrated battle teams, they often didn't have a table, and could only gather in scattered groups. The final battle had not yet begun, but a large number of people had already gathered in the small battlefield. The elite disciples were all present, and there were also many instructors. Instructor Ji Tianxiang was also among them, because this was Chu Mu's final battle. As Chu Mu's former instructor, he had always been paying attention to this rapidly growing genius. When he knew that Chu Mu was going to fight with Jin Yanlei, he was very shocked. He even wanted to persuade Chu Mu to take back his words. However, the head instructor stopped him. Only then did Ji Tianxiang feel somewhat relieved. Since even the head instructor, who valued Chu Mu, did not stop him, he must have some confidence in Chu Mu. Or perhaps, the head instructor wanted to see Chu Mu's limit. In the end, he would be able to save Chu Mu's life. In Ji Tianxiang's heart, it should be the latter. True geniuses also needed to experience setbacks, hardships, and failures to walk out of them. They needed to learn from their experiences and improve themselves. They needed to make themselves truly strong from the depths of their hearts. Only then could they become strong. Chu Mu's growth was very fast. His talent was shocking, and his fighting strength was also very shocking. It was also time for Chu Mu to experience some great setbacks in order for his spirit to grow. This Chu Mu is really overestimating himself. He actually wants to fight to the death with a divine condensation realm swordsman. Isn't this just throwing his life away? One of the instructors suddenly sneered. The other instructors had limited understanding of Chu Mu, so they all nodded their heads. Ji Tianxiang frowned, but did not refute. Instructor Ji Tianxiang, I heard that this Chu Mu was your disciple when he was still an official disciple? The instructor's tone was a bit strange, and the smile on his face was also a bit strange as he looked at Ji Tianxiang. He spoke neither slowly nor quickly. You have a problem with that? Ji Tianxiang replied coldly. This person had never been on good terms with him, and the two of them had quite a bit of conflict. No problem. This person hurriedly waved his hand and said with an expression that said, I just feel that the disciple also represents the instructor's face. Although he is now an elite disciple and has left his status as an official disciple, at least he was once one. The disciple does not know the immensity of heaven and earth. This should also be the instructor's fault for not teaching him properly and letting him understand that he should be down to earth. Don't you think so, Instructor Ji Tianxiang? Anyone could hear the sarcasm in his words. The other instructors did not respond, because if they did, they would become enemies with him. They all responded with silence. I understand the meaning of your words. You feel that Chu Mu is overestimating himself by challenging the golden flame lightning, and is seeking his own death, right? Ji Tianxiang was very angry in his heart, but a cold smile appeared on his face. I didn't say that. Instructor Ji Tianxiang, you can't wrong me like that. The other person's innocent expression suddenly changed, and he laughed sinisterly. I was thinking, why don't we play a game? I wonder if Instructor Ji Tianxiang has the guts to do so? What game? Ji Tianxiang smiled coldly. It's a very simple game. I heard that even the elite disciples bet on who will win in the end. Why don't we also bet on who will win in the end? The other party's face was full of smiles, but his tone became sharp. I'll use the Emperor-grade mid-level armor I recently obtained as the wager, and bet that the Golden Thunder Flame will win. I wonder if Instructor Ji Tianxiang dares to accept the wager? Of course. The Golden Flame Lightning's extremely precious. If you lose, Instructor Ji Tianxiang will have to pay a corresponding price. The loss will be huge. I can understand if you don't dare to accept. Just pretend I didn't say anything. Before Ji Tianxiang could reply, the other person spoke again. His tone was strange, and contained all kinds of sarcasm. There was also a provocation and so on. Even if he lost, he could not lose. Ji Tianxiang did not lose his reason. He thought for a moment and made a decision. The Buddha fights for incense, and people live for a breath. As a swordsman, no matter if his sharpness was exposed or restrained, he could not endure such mockery and ridicule, especially when the other person was his sworn enemy. Ji Tianxiang knew that the other person's character was inferior. Once he rejected the other person's bet, there would be all kinds of rumors about how he was afraid of him, and so on. Even if he lost, he could not give the other person the chance to be despicable. All right, I'm lacking a treasure robe. I'll bet on Chu Mu winning. Ji Tianxiang smiled coldly and said, however, I'm not as rich as you. 4,000,000 mid-grade origin crystals if you want, come. 4,000,000 mid-grade origin crystals. Compared to the Golden Flame Lightning's mid-grade origin crystals, there is indeed a gap. However, it's a game. Don't worry so much. The other person pretended to hesitate at first, then said straightforwardly. Then, he said to the other instructors, everyone, please be the witnesses. Under the watchful eyes of everyone, it was impossible to go back on the bet. Otherwise, his reputation would be ruined. This guy is going to earn 4,000,000 mid-grade origin crystals. The other instructors were very envious. 4,000,000 mid-grade origin crystals. Ji Tianxiang will probably feel the pinch for a long time. This should be the majority of his savings. If he wins, he will get a mid-grade Golden Flame Lightning's mid-grade origin crystals. That's worth at least 5,000,000 mid-grade origin crystals. Then do you think he will win? Many instructors secretly transmitted their voices to discuss this matter. After all, Ji Tianxiang was here. If they openly discussed this matter, they would definitely offend Ji Tianxiang. They did not have any conflict with Ji Tianxiang, so they would not offend him because of this matter. After the bet was raised, the other party did not continue to provoke Ji Tianxiang. There was a smug smile on his face. In his opinion, 4 million mid-grade origin crystals was definitely a win for him. That was good too. He had almost gone bankrupt because he tried every means to buy a mid-grade golden flame lightning's mid-grade origin crystals. 4 million mid-grade origin crystals was enough to enrich his savings again. Thinking about it, he felt very excited. Chumu, you have to win. My entire fortune is on you. Ji Tianxiang's expression was not very good, but he secretly said in his heart. At this time, he could only place his hopes on Chumu. Jin Yanlei sat in the crowd of the Demon Slayer battle team. He sat at the same table as the head captain, vice head captain, and 2 other elders. They were chatting and laughing, as if they did not care about this battle. Zhen Tian's battle teams Qin Shana, Tu Gang, and Tantai Liuguang were all present. They sat in a corner of the spectator seats, occupying a table. There were 3 gourds of 10,000 beasts' blood, and some barbecued meat jerky on it. They looked very relaxed and did not seem to be in a hurry. At this time, Chumu arrived and walked into the small battlefield. Immediately, many gazes pierced through the void and shot onto Chumu's body. Chapter 734. Now, you have one more chance to cancel this battle. A 9-star Sword King instructor was the referee. He stood between Chumu and Golden Flame Lei and spoke solemnly to the 2. If he is willing to kneel down and kowtow to me 3 times as an apology, and swear that no matter where he sees me in the future, he will kneel down and kowtow to me once, I can agree to cancel this battle. Golden Flame Lei stared at Chumu with a sharp glint in his eyes. It was extremely oppressive. A cold smile hung on the corner of its mouth, and its words were extremely harsh. Even if you do this, I will not spare your life. Chumu said lightly. Underneath his plain words, there was a deep killing intent. The 2 glared at each other from a few meters away. It was like 2 electric currents clashing, making crackling sounds. The killing intent was shockingly dense. The referee's face was expressionless, but he was silently cursing in his heart. He glanced at Chumu and silently wondered what this Origin Realm swordsman was relying on to dare say such words. Or perhaps, he had no choice but to say such words because of the situation. Wasn't he a bit too ignorant? Subconsciously, the judge looked down on Chumu. It was true that a swordsman had a sharp edge, but he had to know his own limits. A reckless swordsman would not be able to live for long. However, this was someone else's business. He was only appointed by the head instructor to be the judge. It had nothing to do with him, so there was no need to say more. Since you don't plan to cancel this life and death battle, then sign this life and death agreement. In the end, no matter who lives and who dies, both teams are not allowed to retaliate against each other in any way. Otherwise, you will be punished by the Sword Palace. The referee took out 3 life and death agreements that he had prepared and said. Jin Yanlei smiled again. He was the one who suggested the agreement. The head captain of the demon-slaying battle team would come forward and use some connections to get the agreement. This was actually to guard against Tu Gang and Tantai Liuguang from the Zhen Tian battle team. It was to prevent them from using the forces behind them to take revenge on the demon-slaying battle team. Although the Sky Edge Sword Palace did not allow it, it would not be a good thing for the demon-slaying battle team if there was a conflict. Chumu would not object to signing the life and death agreement. To him, this was not a bad thing. Both sides had their own thoughts. Soon, they signed their names on the life and death forms. Once the life and death forms were completed, the Golden Flame Lei would get one, and so would Chumu. Choose the terrain, the referee said expressionlessly as he put away the 3rd life and death contract. Choose a suitable burial ground for yourself, Jin Yanlei taunted Chumu. The swamp is very suitable for burying your corpse, Chumu said calmly. He chose the terrain with a single sentence, and at the same time, refuted the other party. The swamp. Both sides have no objections. Now, everyone, enter the swamp. The referee said with an expressionless face. Jean Yanlei did not move. His body flashed and streaked across the air like a bolt of lightning. He landed on one of the small battlefield's swamp and stood on one of the few pieces of land in the swamp. Chu Mu's figure also flashed. Like a gust of wind, he landed on another piece of land in the swamp. He was 1,000 meters away from the golden flame thunder, facing it from afar. Their battle was a life and death battle. Therefore, there were no red or blue flags. The terrain of the swamp was special. There was only a small amount of solid land. Most of the swamp was swamp. If one accidentally fell into the swamp, one would be trapped in the swamp. Even if one had the cultivation of the god condensation realm, it would still be troublesome. For Jean Yanlei and Chu Mu, 1,000 meters was a distance that could be covered in an instant. Demon Slayer teams Jean Yanlei vs Gentian teams Chu Mu. Life and death battle. Now, the expressionless referee suddenly shouted. He raised his hand and chopped down. At the same time, he shouted, "Begin." As soon as he finished speaking, Jean Yanlei and Chu Mu's bodies moved at the same time. Two sharp sounds of wind breaking rang out. The two figures broke through the sound barrier and rushed towards each other. Sword light bloomed in the air. In an instant they collided and crossed each other. Sparks flew everywhere. The terrifying chi cut in all directions, leaving white marks in the air. They cut through the swamp's ground, leaving gullies that were slowly filled up. The battle started. Everyone stopped what they were doing. Their eyes shone brightly as they stared at the two sides. The scene of Chu Mu being completely defeated as expected by a few people didn't appear. In their first exchange they seemed to be evenly matched. Jean Yanlei must have held back. The swordsmen all thought. Only then did they feel a little better. However, these experts were able to see some signs. Just now, the golden flame thunder didn't have any intentions of holding back. Yet, Chu Mu was still able to block it and instantly counterattack. This caused them to feel astonished, and at the same time, they felt that today's life and death battle wasn't so simple. Good kid. Ji Tianxiang's taut nerves slightly relaxed. With his eyesight as a 4-star sword king, he was able to see the instant when the two sides' attacks collided. Chu Mu wasn't at a disadvantage at all. This meant that even if Chu Mu wasn't the Golden Flame Thunder's opponent, he was still able to withstand the opponent's sword for a while. In a critical moment, the head instructor should not sit and watch. Chu Mu's strength was still beyond Ji Tianxiang's expectations. The stronger he was, the happier Ji Tianxiang was. This proved that his eyesight was not bad. Chu Mu crossed paths with the Golden Flame Thunder. When he turned around, his sword slashed through the air, and an extreme sword ray flew through the air towards the opponent. In an instant, they collided and exploded. Countless fine sword rays pierced through the air, leaving behind faint scars that shot into the swamp ground. It was like rain hitting banana leaves, riddling the surface of the swamp with holes. In terms of the strength of sword energy, Chu Mu was not as good as Jean Yanlei. However, in terms of sword intent and profound, Jean Yanlei was not as good as Chu Mu. Even though Jean Yanlei had the power of divine sense, allowing him to fully utilize his sword intent and profound, it was still difficult to close the gap between the 6th Revolution sword intent and the 7th Revolution sword intent. That's right. Chu Mu had only controlled his sword intent and profound to the 7th Revolution level. He had not used all of his strength. This was the result of his half a month of hard work. The result of controlling his sword intent and profound was the intensity of his output. Even though it was only the 7th Revolution, it still shocked many people. 7th Revolution, what a terrifying genius! His sword intent and profound of metal have both reached the 7th Revolution. 7th Revolution sword intent and profound of metal. With such talent, he can be said to be a unique genius in our Sky Edge Sword Palace. No wonder he has such confidence and dares to fight a divine condensation realm swordsman to the death. However, he is still too reckless. He doesn't know that with such talent, he should cultivate properly. In the future, his achievements will definitely surpass Jin Yanlei. As the referee, the 9-star sword of Gojoseon secretly said with a hint of surprise in his eyes. Good boy. His sword intent and profound of metal have both reached the 7th revolution. Truly, truly. Ji Tianxiang's expression was excited. He unconsciously clenched his fists and his body slightly trembled. The Chu Mu of today had truly exceeded his expectations. The 7th revolution sword intent profound is indeed powerful. However, the current me is not the same as the me from a year ago. Prepare to die. Jin Yanlei sneered and charged towards Chu Mu once again. The power of his initial divine condensation realm divine sense was twice as strong as before. He poured it into his sword and launched an attack. Chu Mu released his mind power and covered a radius of 10 meters. Even the dust in the air could be clearly seen. The condensation of the 5th mind star had caused Chu Mu's mind power to reach an unimaginable level. The trajectory of Jin Yanlei's sword was clearly displayed and perceived by Chu Mu. The 7th level of the sword technique domain was activated. The space within a radius of 7 meters was distorted. Jin Yanlei immediately felt an irresistible force pulling him. He had no choice but to pour in more energy to resist it. In the sword technique domain, Jin Yanlei was still only at the 5th level. The swords collided unavoidably. The powerful divine sense passed through Chu Mu's sword and blasted into his spiritual world. If it was a year ago, Chu Mu would have had to spend a lot of effort to resist such a powerful divine sense. He would have been at a disadvantage, and might even have been injured by Jin Yanlei. However, there was a huge difference between 5 mind stars and 3 mind stars. Once Jin Yanlei's divine sense entered Chu Mu's spiritual world, it was destroyed by the pure and powerful mind power of the 5 mind stars. It was unable to cause any harm to Chu Mu. It couldn't even hold him back. Chu Mu's sword was extremely sharp. Every strike was simple but contained endless changes. The tip of the sword vibrated at a high speed, making it impossible for Jin Yanlei to determine where the sword would land. Under the extreme mountain quake force, Jin Yanlei only felt a terrifying vibrating force that caused his sword to vibrate. In the blink of an eye, it spread to his hand and arm. He felt numb. Since they couldn't fly, they couldn't stay in the air for too long. They had no choice but to land. Below them was the swamp. The sword energy was activated and covered the bottom of their feet. The moment they touched the swamp, the sword energy exploded. With 2 booms, the swamp shattered and mud splashed everywhere. Chu Mu and Jin Yanlei used the momentum to soar into the sky. They changed their positions in the air and flew towards each other again. Sword light flashed and their figures intersected. In the eyes of swordsmen who weren't strong enough, it was just an instant. However, in the eyes of powerful swordsmen, Chu Mu and Jin Yanlei's swords had exchanged at least a dozen strikes. The battle was extremely intense, causing everyone to be incomparably nervous. Everyone stared fixedly at the 2 figures reflected in their eyes. Kill! The roar was like thunder, rolling and shaking. It turned into a shockwave that blasted towards Chu Mu. It contained traces of divine sense. This was also an attack. Break! Chu Mu didn't show any signs of weakness. With a roar, his voice was like thunder. It was like a sharp sword that slashed and went against the flow. The 8 desolate sky swords stabbed out silently. All of their power was contained within. The air within 7 meters was distorted, and it looked like a myriad of colors that could shake one's soul, causing one to be dazzled. Chu Mu's sword light was reflected in Jin Yanlei's eyes. He waved his sword with his tyrannical cultivation base and power. It was as if one sword could break through 10,000 technique. Chu Mu's eyelids twitched. The light in his eyes was restrained. The sword he stabbed out trembled slightly. He looked for a weak point and slashed down. Chapter 735. 7th Revolution Sword Intent, 7th Revolution Metal Profound, 7th Level Sword Technique Domain, Unimaginably Powerful Mental Force. Various thoughts flashed through the minds of the Sword of Gojosian, causing them to be extremely shocked. The Sword of Gojosian, who had made a bet with Ji Tianxiang, had an ugly expression. Genius, this was a true genius. In front of him, the other geniuses of the Sky Edge Sword Palace were all overshadowed and reduced to mere foils. So powerful! Xikong Zhan was stunned. Chu Mu's strength had completely exceeded his expectations. However, Xikong Zhan was only shocked and not fearful. This was because he, who had refined his sword intent and star profound to the 6th revolution, had yet to feel the limit. In other words, he could refine his sword intent and star profound to the 7th revolution, or at least the 7th revolution. As for the sword technique domain, he had also reached the 6th level. In Xikong Zhan's eyes, the 7th level was not an insurmountable gap. However, in his heart, he sighed ruefully. When he was still an official disciple, Chu Mu simply wasn't his opponent. Yet now, Chu Mu had already surpassed him. In his heart, a bit of admiration arose. However, we're betting on the battle team, not the strength of an individual. Confidence rose in Xikong Zhan's heart. In terms of strength, the current him had been overtaken by Chu Mu. However, in terms of the development of the battle team, the Stardust battle team was faster than the Zhentian battle team. He also firmly believed that the Stardust battle team would definitely surpass the 3 super battle teams, and surpass the Zhentian battle team. As the sword fell, the golden flame thunder's sword that could sweep 1,000 armies paused. Like a punctured balloon, its power was exhausted. However, he did not panic and attacked with his divine sense. At the same time, his wrist crazily rotated, and the tip of the sword began to twist towards Chu Mu like a blender, attempting to twist Chu Mu's sword out of his hand. Chu Mu's sword trembled, and a tyrannical power spread out. The air shattered, and the golden flame thunder's sword paused. The sword's style was broken, and a cold star enlarged in front of his eyes. It was incomparably sharp, and it caused his pupils to shrink. After a few moves, the golden flame thunder seemed to be at a disadvantage, which was very shocking. In terms of swordsmanship, Chu Mu wasn't even afraid of the sword of Gojosian, let alone a mere golden flame lightning. After all, the Archean world was the birthplace of swordsmen. It had a longer history and a deeper foundation. Compared to places like the ancient sword continent, the Archean world paid more attention to the basic. As a result, their attainments in swordsmanship were much more profound than the swordsmen of the ancient sword continent. How did his swordsmanship become so terrifying? Jin Yanlei was shocked. He was even more surprised to find that his spiritual sense was unable to cause any harm to Chu Mu. It was inconceivable. One had to know that his cultivation had broken through to the initial level of the divine condensation realm, and the power of his divine sense had doubled from before. It didn't make sense. It didn't make sense at all. Jin Yanlei didn't dare to imagine that in just 1 year, Chu Mu's spiritual sense had reached a level where it could compete with his spiritual sense. His power exploded, and he used his full speed. The golden flame thunder retreated in the blink of an eye, pulling away from Chu Mu. The short exchange made him understand that even though his cultivation had broken through to the initial level of the divine condensation realm, Chu Mu's power had increased by leaps and bounds. It was to the point where he couldn't do anything about it. Since that's the case, I'll let you have a taste of my new secret technique, the golden flame thunder said angrily. Jin Yanlei shouted angrily. As he waved his hands, a strong current of air whizzed past. A tyrannical power was released from his body. It was the secret technique that Jin Yanlei had used a year ago. This wasn't a new secret technique. After using this secret technique and increasing his power, the golden flame thunder used a new secret technique. A tyrannical spiritual sense rippled out in all directions, and the power of his spiritual sense increased by 50%. Spiritual sense amplification secret technique. There were high and low ranks of secret techniques, and there were also high and low prices. The spiritual sense amplification secret technique belonged to the soul category, and was extremely precious and rare. The reason why the Golden Flame Thunder could obtain this secret technique was because of the head captain of the demon-slaying battle team, Haiwia. With his strength increased by 80% and his spiritual sense increased by 50%, the Golden Flame Thunder's power increased explosively. With a boom, a sword slashed through the air. Its momentum was like thunder, earth-shattering and heaven-shaking. Under this sword, the space in front of him seemed to be cut open. The frightening spiritual sense contained within caused the void to tremble, radiating out and creating layers of ripples. The might of this sword was extremely powerful. After using the secret technique, the Golden Flame Thunder's overall power increased by 2 to 3 times. Extreme Realm Counterattack. The two swords clashed and a terrifying force was transmitted, causing Chu Mu's arm to go numb. He felt as if his arm was about to explode. The violent divine remembrance rushed into his mental world and attacked the sword's soul fledgling stage. The 5 mind stars flickered in unison, and 5 extremely pure spiritual thoughts transformed into mind swords that slashed out. In an instant, the raging divine sense was divided into 5 parts, one after another, obliterating them. Under the impact of the collision, Chu Mu borrowed the momentum to fly back, dissipating the impact. The numbness in his arm faded away, and at the same time, he pulled away from the Golden Flame Thunder. Go ahead and unleash your secret technique. I'm going to crush you to death in your strongest state. The tyrannical power and berserk spiritual sense gave the Golden Flame Thunder a feeling of invincibility. He was extremely excited. Pushing back Chu Mu with one sword made him even more confident. He actually didn't take the opportunity to chase after Chu Mu, instead laughing loudly. Chu Mu wouldn't be polite. He quickly took out 2 blood yang pellets and threw them into his mouth. Wrapped in sword yuan, they were swallowed into his stomach. The 2 blood yang pellets quietly stayed in his stomach. Subsequently, Chu Mu used the burning blood transformation. The burning blood transformation wasn't easy to cultivate. Thus, Chu Mu hadn't cultivated it to the level of Deshang yet, but it still doubled his strength. A faint, smoke-like blood-red flame burned around his body. A tyrannical power came from the burning blood essence, crazily surging through his body like a high-powered water pump. However, this power was completely under Chu Mu's control. It made him feel excited, but at the same time, he didn't lose himself in the power and lose his mind. What secret technique is that? How can it be so tyrannical? The Sword of Gojoseon instructors were all shocked. It should be a secret technique that burns one's own blood. It should be burning blood essence. Could it be the burning blood sword of Gojoseon's burning blood transformation? As expected of the 9-star Sword of Gojoseon, the referee was very knowledgeable and immediately guessed correctly. Watch how I kill you. Jin Yanlei laughed heartily. The power of his divine sense increased, becoming more and more violent. It was a bit out of his control, making him extremely excited, as if he had been injected with chicken blood. The impact flew past, leaving a mark on the incomparably viscous surface of the swamp. His sword flashed with a dazzling light, piercing the void in front of him and creating a vacuum. The air exploded like a thunderclap breaking through the sky. Without dodging or retreating, Chu Mu counterattacked with his sword. Jin Yanlei's sword was clearly visible in Chu Mu's eyes. In that instant, Chu Mu's sword pierced through the tip of Jin Yanlei's sword. The extreme warrior power exploded. The extreme 7th Revolution sword intent, the extreme 7th Revolution gold profound, the extreme mountain shaking energy, the extreme Tianhuang sword yuan of the extreme astral realm, and the terrifying power of the burning blood transformation all condensed into one. It was an extremely powerful sword attack. More than half of the power on the tip of Jean Yanlei's sword was shattered. Only the violent divine sense rushed towards Chu Mu. Chu Mu's divine sense turned into 5 invisible swords and attacked again. Jean Yanlei's sword was bent. His sword intent and profound have increased again. Extreme 7th revolution. He has actually reached the extreme 7th revolution. Before the 7th revolution, sword intent and profound were only between the 1st revolution and the 6th revolution. The difference between the early and middle stages was not that big. But from the 7th revolution onwards, the difference between each small stage would become obvious. Before, Chu Mu had only displayed the early 7th revolution sword intent and gold profound, which had already shocked everyone. But now, with the 7th revolution sword intent and gold profound, his power had multiplied. It was no longer enough to be described as shocking. The combination of the 7th revolution sword intent, gold profound, and the power of the burning blood transformation made Chu Mu not any weaker than Jean Yanlei. Piss off! With a furious roar, Jean Yanlei's power exploded. The sword suddenly straightened, and a powerful force rushed out like a raging storm, almost tearing Chu Mu into pieces. Within the storm of power, Chu Mu was like a flying swallow. He drew an arc in the air and returned with another sword attack. The extreme warrior power was even more powerful than before. Cutting through the void, it left a blazing trail that was extremely dazzling. Jean Yanlei hurriedly waved his sword to block. With a clanging sound, it was as if steel had been broken. The power exploded, and Jean Yanlei's entire body flew back. Chu Mu waved his left sleeve, and a powerful force bombarded the air. The force rebounded, and Chu Mu borrowed the momentum to rush forward, stabbing his sword at Jean Yanlei. Jean Yanlei was shocked and hurriedly retreated. At the same time, he sent out a sword light. Dozens of sword lights flew out, and each of them was imbued with divine sense. They were pulled and scattered, shooting at Chu Mu from all directions. Each sword light had a terrifying power, just like flying swords. Chu Mu had no choice but to wave his sword, activating the mountain-shaking energy to the limit to block each sword light's attack. His powerful mental power allowed him to block each sword light's attack. Jean Yanlei's expression was gloomy. The situation was completely out of his expectations. In the audience, the head captain of the demon-slaying battle team, Hai Wuyao, had a serious expression. He stared at Chu Mu and Jean Yanlei without blinking. No one knew what he was thinking. As for the other members of the demon-slaying battle team, they were all shocked. Although Jean Yanlei's strength was only ranked 6th in the demon-slaying battle team, the other 2 elders were only slightly stronger than him. If they were to fight against Chu Mu, they would not be able to gain the upper hand. Thinking of this, their hearts were heavy, and their killing intent was overflowing. The Origin Realm. Don't forget that Chu Mu was only an Origin Realm swordsman, and he was already so powerful. What if he broke through to the God Condensation Realm? If Chu Mu broke through to the God Condensation Realm, perhaps only the head captain, Hai Wuyao, could defeat him in the entire demon-slaying battle team. Right now, they could only hope that Jean Yanlei would be able to kill Chu Mu. Otherwise, if such a monster were to grow, it would not be a good thing for them. Chu Mu, you deserve to die. You forced me to do this. Jean Yanlei sneered, and a red pellet suddenly appeared in his hand. Chapter 736. The red pill was the size of a pigeon's egg. It was round, bright, and translucent. A berserk aura was emitted from the red pill. One could vaguely see black lines flashing on the surface of the pill from time to time. It was like a dragon coming out of the water or a python coming out of its cave. In the end, we have no choice but to use the berserk pill. The vice-captain of the Demon Slayer battle team sighed. The higher-ups of the other 2 super battle teams and the instructors' eyes trembled. They stared at the red pill in Jean Yanlei's hand with serious expressions. Obviously, they recognized that thing. Chu Mu didn't know what that thing was. He could only be sure that it was a type of pill. A pill that could be used at a critical moment. Looking at Jean Yanlei's ferocious expression and eyes, he could be sure. Chu Mu, welcome your death. Golden Flame Thunder laughed malevolently. It threw the red pill into its mouth and swallowed it with a gulu sound. Berserk pill. It was a type of pill that would cause a person to enter a berserk state. In a berserk state, one's strength would double. In other words, it didn't matter if one's strength was increased by a secret technique. As long as one took the berserk pill, one's strength would increase by 50%. It was extremely terrifying. The price of the berserk pill was also extraordinary. One pill was worth 1,000,000 low-grade origin crystals. As the berserk pellet entered his stomach, a terrifying berserk energy swept through his entire body. The golden flame thunder roared like an ancient beast, shaking the heavens and earth. Kacha, 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 continuous sounds came from his body. His body was being attacked by a wave of energy, as if it was swelling up. Blue veins bulged like poisonous snakes under his skin. It looked extremely ferocious and terrifying. Jean Yanlei's eyes turned red. His gaze was wild, as if he was losing focus. His mind was entering a berserk state. It really is a berserk pill. It seems that Jean Yanlei has made ample preparations to kill Chu Mu. The Demon Slayer battle team has also paid a great price. Many instructors sighed. The berserk great pill was indeed useful. It doubled one's strength, and it was effective even when using a secret technique. However, it also had side effects. Once the medicinal effect wore off, the person would fall into a weakened state for up to a month. During this month, the person had to rest and recuperate slowly. This was because the principle of the berserk pill was to stimulate the potential in the depths of the human body and burst it out in advance. It was equivalent to harming the foundation of the body. However, the damage wasn't too great and it could be recovered after a good rest. The situation with the Golden Flame Thunder was different. He had used 2 secret techniques, and the side effects were not small. Taking the Berserk Great Pellet to stimulate his potential and enter a berserk state would increase the side effects by several times. Even if he managed to kill Chu Mu this time, he would also suffer great losses. It was equivalent to killing 1,000 enemies, but losing 800 of his own men. But no matter what, he had to win. He had to kill Chu Mu, no matter the cost. The impact of the berserk energy formed a whistling airflow around the Golden Flame Thunder. The air was pushed aside and fluctuated continuously. It was like a surging tide, vibrating with the slightest movement of the Golden Flame Thunder. With a stomp of his foot, the horrifying energy shattered the ground under his feet. The Golden Flame Thunder borrowed the force and shot up into the sky like a cannonball. It immediately turned around in the air and stared at Chu Mu with its scarlet eyes. Like a nightmare, it locked onto Chu Mu and dove down. The sound of the air exploding was getting louder and louder. The terrifying speed compressed the air in front of it, forming a horrifying pressure that was enough to shatter a normal True Realm sword artist. As the pressure pressed down on Chu Mu, it instantly shattered Chu Mu's protective sword aura. His cheeks caved in and he could barely open his eyes. His long hair and robes were almost torn apart. After the horrifying pressure, the sword descended from the sky. The sword light was blazing, as if it could split the heaven and earth. This sword made Chu Mu feel like he was shrouded in the shadow of death. He couldn't dodge or move. The berserk state of the Golden Flame Thunder was too horrifying. Be careful. Qin Shanhe and the other 2 had a drastic change in expression. They could no longer stay calm. They didn't know what Chu Mu's true strength was. Now that they saw the Golden Flame Thunder continuously using his trump cards and increasing his strength to an indescribable level, it seemed like Chu Mu was in danger. Ji Tianxiang's palms were covered in sweat. His muscles were tight and he was extremely nervous. He couldn't wait to save Chu Mu himself. Originally, he thought that Chu Mu wouldn't be a match for the Golden Flame Thunder and would be defeated quickly. However, the situation was out of his expectations. Chu Mu was actually able to resist the Golden Flame Thunder's attacks and slowly gain the upper hand. He allowed the Golden Flame Thunder to continuously use secret arts while Chu Mu slowly revealed his strength and maintained a slight advantage. Now that the Golden Flame Thunder had consumed the Berserk pellet, Chu Mu didn't seem to have anything similar. Under such circumstances, how could he resist the Golden Flame Thunder, whose strength had doubled? It didn't matter if he lost 4 million mid-grade origin crystals. The most important thing was Chu Mu's life. Such a genius shouldn't fall here. The Golden Flame Thunder's face was ferocious. He slashed down with his sword and his strength increased. His face was filled with bloodlust. It was as if he could see Chu Mu being cut in half by his sword. Blood splattered everywhere. It's about to end. Earning 4 million mid-grade origin crystals like this is really easy. The sword of Gojoseon, who was opposing Ji Tianxiang, laughed in a low voice. His voice was just loud enough for Ji Tianxiang to hear. However, Ji Tianxiang's attention was completely focused on Chu Mu. He ignored him. The head instructor, who was secretly watching the battle, was also preparing to make a move. No matter what, he wouldn't let Chu Mu die here. In the blink of an eye, just as the Demon Slayer battle team revealed victorious smiles, a terrifying sharpness erupted and rushed into the sky. It was as if an invisible divine sword had been unsealed from Chu Mu's body, releasing an indescribable sharpness to its heart's content. The space around his body seemed to have been cut open. That was sword intent. The sword intent rushed into the sky. Chu Mu's body and the sky directly formed a vacuum. In the eyes of the others, it was as if an invisible sword was going to pierce through the sky. This sharpness was horrifying. Everyone in the small battlefield felt as if their skin had been sliced by a sword, causing them to feel a piercing pain. Astonishment, incomparable astonishment. Everyone was astonished. Everyone and their companions were stunned. They were all dumbfounded. Their thoughts stopped, their expressions froze, and their movements were stiff. They were like statues. The evil smile on the Golden Flame Thunder's face turned into fear. This sword intent, caused him to tremble from the bottom of his heart. Chu Mu's eyes were filled with a golden glow. A cold golden glow, a golden glow filled with sharpness. Being glanced at by him, Golden Flame Lei's heart couldn't help but tremble. His body felt like it was being cut by countless swords. Waves of pain swept through his entire body, causing him to unconsciously let out a muffled groan. 8th Revolution Sword Intent. 8th Revolution Gold Profound. In the void, an indescribable exclamation sounded. It was very emotional and very shocked. It also explained the shock in everyone's heart. Facing the Golden Flame Thunder, who had taken the Berserk Great Pill, Chu Mu had no choice but to explode with all his strength. 8th Revolution Sword Intent and 8th Revolution Gold Profound. Although it was only the initial stage, the 8th Revolution was still the 8th Revolution. It was much more powerful than the 7th Revolution. In the end, the Golden Flame Thunder's sword still slashed down. The trembling in his heart stimulated his ferocious nature. This sword became even more ferocious. The berserk pressure could no longer affect Chu Mu. Under the 8th Revolution Sword Intent and 8th Revolution Gold Profound, Chu Mu's eyes shone brightly. He stared at the Golden Flame Thunder. His body didn't move. As his left hand waved, he threw out a few jade plates. The Golden Flame Thunder's sword slashed down and shattered the jade plates. The defensive seal and counterattack seal appeared. The moment the jade plates blocked the Golden Flame Thunder's sword, a powerful counterattack caused the Golden Flame Thunder's sword to tremble. An opening appeared. Chu Mu made his move. His sword was extremely fast. It was so fast that even the sword of Gojoseon could barely see the blurry traces. The Golden Flame Thunder didn't even feel it. He only felt a sudden pain in his neck. It was a tearing pain. Following that, he felt that his thoughts were floating endlessly. It was as if he saw the scene in the sky. The sky and the earth were spinning. They were neck and neck. In the eyes of others, they only saw the golden flame thunder's head leave his body and fly high into the sky. No one made a sound because they were still in shock. Their thoughts hadn't recovered yet. The head fell and landed on the swamp. Blood splashed all over the ground and slowly sank. The golden flame thunder's body also fell back. With a bang, dust flew into the air. Chu-Mu shook off the blood on the tip of his sword and put it back into its scabbard. The golden light in his eyes disappeared. The sword energy in his body spread out. The 2 blood yang pellets melted. The medicinal energy spread out and covered his entire body. Only now did Chu-Mu cancel the burning blood transformation. His body swayed slightly. His face was somewhat pale. He felt waves of weakness attack his body. Fortunately, the blood yang pellet's medicinal energy had dissolved and started to nourish his essence blood. The feeling of weakness slowly disappeared. After 10 breaths, Chu-Mu took the golden flame thunder's spatial ring. He had killed the golden flame thunder, so this was his spoils of war. Even the golden flame thunder's sword was put away by Chu-Mu. Only now did everyone react. The Demon Slayer battle team's eyes were all red. Their killing intent soared into the sky as they crazily attacked Chu-Mu. The judge waved his hand and the violent killing intent dissipated. He stared at the Demon Slayer battle team indifferently and said expressionlessly, "Both sides have signed the life and death agreement. From now on, the Demon Slayer battle team cannot take revenge on Chu-Mu in any way. Let's go." The vast sea sword master, Hai Wuya, suddenly stood up and left. The Demon Slayer battle team was filled with unwillingness and killing intent. They stared viciously at Chu-Mu, as if they wanted to engrave Chu-Mu in their minds. Then, they followed Hai Wuya and left the small battlefield. They didn't have the face to continue staying. Leaving was the best option. Originally, this should have been a battle that would raise the Demon Slayer battle team's reputation. However, the result was the opposite. It was a huge blow to the Demon Slayer battle team's reputation. It was enough to make them a laughing stock for a period of time.